Do you know what correlates with STD rates around the world and in this country? Christianity.
Oh, I see. Wait a second.
The more Christian states have more STDs, the more Christian countries have more STDs.
So what demographic do you think is the most polyamorous? Would you say homosexuals?
I don't know.
Homosexuals, Richard?
So the relevant metric would be
Richard,
numbers.
is it homosexuals?
So, no, you're asking about rate, but if you're talking about raw numbers,
no, I'm
there
just
are
asking you, are there more polyamorous people
Yes.
who are yes, thank you.
No.
And what are the STD rates of those polyamorous people?
No. You're wrong. If that happened, if the country actually voted to destroy itself, I would have to leave.
You say the use of force rather than persuasion in democracy. That's what fascism is. If people utilize democracy to limit democracy, it's still democracy.
Yeah, a fascist democracy.
That's not fascism.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So
it's a fascist democracy?
This is going to be a big, beautiful debate. Want to let you know our next debate conference is tentatively planned at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Modern Day Debate is very excited to expand onto university campuses, as well as if anyone has a church. That's also another great venue. We do love Holiday Inn. They've been fantastic in hosting our debate cons, but we do think that if we expand to other venues as well, it will open a lot of doors. So if you happen to have any connections at a university, like a student group, or maybe you're a professor, and you're like, hey, yeah, we'd love to host a debate conference or just a one-off debate, reach out at moderndaydebate@gmail.com. That includes, if you're listening online, as we want Modern Day Debate to expand to all the venues. And with that, I am very excited to get this debate started on Christianity or secular humanism, which is best for society. Now, very important, in order for us to put these events on, sponsors such as Zach Gelpe from Maine First Project make this possible. We are very excited to partner with them. The reason being, we have shared values of free speech as well as fair debate. I've gotten to know Zach. I'm going to welcome him up here. I've got to tell you, getting to know him the last couple of days, he's a great guy. Maine First Project is fighting for conservatism in New England and beyond. So I want to welcome Zach. Thank you for being with us. I want to give you a chance to share more.
Thank you. Thank you, James. You guys seem pretty subdued. That was... Are you guys ready for this? Are you ready? That's great. Good. Much better. Well, Maine First Project is taking the fight to these leftist communists in Maine, as you guys know. And the reason you should care is a lot of the policies that we're seeing throughout this country stem from Maine. And in order to nip it in the bud, we hope that you support Maine First Project. Please go to mainfirstproject.org and learn about us. Thank you very much, and let the debate begin.
Thank you very much. For those of you watching at home, they are linked in the description box. Check out mainfirstproject.org in the description box. That is linked below. And with that, we're going to jump right into this with introductions of our speakers. So, starting with Dr. Richard Carrier is a world-renowned author and speaker. As a professional historian, published philosopher, and prominent defender of free thought, Dr. Carrier has appeared across the U.S., Canada, the U.K., and Puerto Rico, defending sound historical methods and the ethical worldview of secular naturalism. Please welcome Dr. Richard Carrier. And welcoming Andrew Wilson, who runs The Crucible, which focuses on politics, news, debates, and reviews. And he is also helping spearhead the new debate promotion called World War Debate, which kicks off this coming January. Please welcome Andrew Wilson of The Crucible.
He's got clenched in his teeth, ashes falling like snow on the street, a storm in his eyes, a war in his chest. He plays his
That we are
cards and
ready for liftoff. We are going to get this started with Dr. Richard Carrier's opening statement. The timer is set for you, Dr. Carrier, for 15 minutes.
All right. Secular humanism, as I define it, is the view that we should behave as individuals and organize as societies to maximize universal human well-being, according to evidence and reason. And that means it places evidence over any other authority or ideology, and it puts spreading human life satisfaction above any other interest. Only human interests matter above all, and only evidence can determine how to best achieve them. By contrast, there are 1,000 different Christianities teaching 1,000 different ways to be and to organize society, and all have the Bible on their side, all pick and choose what to follow and what not. So how do we determine which one is correct? If it's by evidence, then that's just secular humanism. If it's not by evidence, then we can't know it's best or even true. And most Christianity does not choose based on evidence but ideology and tradition. We can also compare results. Christianity has been tested for thousands of years. Whenever society-wide, and especially when in control of government, it always increases war and oppression and depresses human well-being. By contrast, when Christianity is set aside and policy and decisions are made based solely on evidence and reason, we got the first human rights-based constitutional democracy since the pagans invented the idea and Christians refused to readopt it 2,000 years ago. Christianity was built to abandon evidence-based morality and politics and to replace it with toxic superstitions and false fanaticisms that ruined almost everything about society. Secular humanism is about no longer listening to those ideas and instead reclaiming evidence-based morality and politics. The observed effect of that decision is seen across the developed free world, from Japan to Sweden, Taiwan to Finland, Australia to Canada, and beyond. The United States is a bit behind in all of these metrics, but it's still mired in Christian nationalism and all its bad decisions. But we could catch up. We just have to choose evidence over superstition and reason over authoritarianism. The earliest example of this dual test and its different outcomes was the United States Constitution and its Bill of Rights, which moved in the correct direction, literally outlawing half of the 10 Commandments and establishing evidence and reason, the only basis for law and justice. And from that derived the most important humanist conclusion about politics: replacing violence as the principal threat or mechanism for resolving conflict with free speech and democracy, a concept we since expanded. Before that, the European wars of religion, known as the Wars of Reformation, had been tearing Europe up for 300 years. The American colonies were also founded in part to escape religious persecution. And before all that, the West was constantly entangled in holy wars since the fall of Rome. The death penalty was widespread and liberally applied, not only across several inquisitions. Elite violence and abuse against the poor and the enslaved was common. Apart from all that normalized violence, oppression was standard. Freedoms were scarce or limited, and most people lived in some degree of poverty, especially when we count slaves and serfs. When poverty for some after the Industrial Revolution fell to 25% of society, that was dependent on the backs of slave-based industry at home or abroad, and otherwise financed by conquest. And when those slaves are counted, the actual poverty level was still around 50%. This is all well established in studies ranging from Martin Ravaillaon's The Economics of Poverty, History and Measurement, and Measurement and Policy, and Michel Malat's The Poor in the Middle Ages, an Essay in Social History, as well as Guido Alfani's Economic Inequality in Pre-Industrial Times for the Journal of Economic Literature. That removing religion and replacing it with human-centered evidence-based reasoning would have resolved or prevented almost all of this has also been well established in modern scholarship, ranging from Hector Avalos' study Fighting Words, The Origins of Religious Violence, and The Reality of Religious Violence, From Biblical to Modern Times, to Steven Pinker's Better Angels of Our Nature, Why Violence Has Declined, and Michael Shermer's The Moral Arc, How Science Makes Us Better People, which all summarize extensive findings in the field of history. This difference is because, in reality, the Christian Bible is full of bad ideas about how to fix all this, which instead, when implemented, only perpetuated and exacerbated it through thousands of years of failure. And that has been well established by studies ranging from, again, Hector Avalos' The Bad Jesus, The Ethics of New Testament Ethics, and Slavery, Abolitionism, and the Ethics of Biblical Scholarship, on up to Phil Zuckerman's Society Without God, What the Least Religious Nations Can Tell Us About Contentment, now in its second edition, and several sociologist studies in the non-religious understanding secular people and societies, and beyond doubt, the secularization of society, and more. If you want to look into this, I cite more studies and articles online, including Justin Brierley and The Folly of Christianity, which summarizes the well-tested material differences between Christian and secular humanist-oriented societies. Further demonstrating that everything good that has happened since the American Revolution came from abandoning the Bible and replacing it with secular, moral, and political philosophy, I demonstrate that in my article, That Christian Nation Nonsense, Gods Bless Our Pagan Nation. I cover many more examples of things we are now grateful for that were actually pagan, rarely in the Bible, and only reluctantly adopted by Christians in my article, No, Tom Holland, It Wasn't Christian Values That Saved the West. So those are the places you can go to follow up on this. But as one illustration among hundreds, consider the sociological studies of Gregory Paul, Gary Jensen, and R.G. Del Montaigne, all of which I cite in my article, Which Worldview Produces the Better World? These show that statistically, the more Christian any developed democratic state, province, or country is, usually the more income inequality there is, the more crime, the more poverty, the more drug abuse and teen pregnancy and illness and death. And the rate of violent crime often increases with the region's religiosity, especially murder. And there's no correlation with atheism. By contrast, the less religious a developed democratic society, the more we see universal caring for the sick and the poor, and less murder, less inequality, longer lifespans, even better healthcare outcomes and at lower cost. Christianity does not cause these better outcomes. It never did in 2,000 years. Only evidence-based, human-centered reasoning did this, often against Christian opposition or indifference. Human-centered values ensure we seek to make the lives better of everyone, not just a select or privileged few. It is therefore a boon to all of humanity, the actual goal we should all want, which benefits even the privileged few, because a happier, more prosperous, and less oppressed populace generates a safer and more prosperous environment for all. So every rational and well-informed person wants this, really. And evidence-based solutions to that goal are always superior to others. Because the most important conclusion about everything that rational evidence-based humanism reaches is that it entails admitting we won't always be right about everything and will always improve and correct ourselves to ever more evidentially supported ways of living and governing. We're always testing, getting rid of what doesn't work, investing more in what does. Christianity, by contrast, prioritizes the God over people, and obedience to unelected authorities, and conformity to outdated self-defeating principles. It tends to undermine or suppress rather than foster freedom and critical thinking. And it has a millennia-long legacy of failure to prove it, as I just summarized, and with those differential statistics I just cited, it is demonstrating that failure continually still. As another illustration among hundreds, consider the concept of human and civil rights, which I discuss in my article, Debunking John Davidson's Pagan America. Human and civil rights exist nowhere in the Bible. Jesus never taught them or anything like them. Neither did any other biblical author. They actually originated with pagan Greeks in the evolution of the Greek confederacies that formed to oppose the tyrannical successors of Alexander the Great. And they were subsequently developed, the concepts, in pre-Christian philosophical thought and adopted by the Roman Republic. They arose out of social contract theory, which today we can establish on an evidence-based foundation of game theory. And this is explicit in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights, which states that, I quote, recognition of the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is the foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world, which is an empirically determined fact. You cannot reliably have freedom, justice, and peace in the world unless you recognize human rights and dignity. It is an empirical fact that only societies that choose to respect at all levels the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all human beings can reliably expect to enjoy freedom, justice, and peace. And the degree to which a people respects everyone's dignity and treats certain things as everyone's equal and inalienable rights will correlate with the degree to which they all enjoy freedom, justice, and peace, as well as emotional and material prosperity. This is another provable empirical fact, and it has already been demonstrated. The more rights respecting a society, the happier and more socially prosperous it is. In fact, game theory shows that this is probably an inevitable fact of all social systems in all possible worlds, as demonstrated in Robert Axelrod's scientific studies of cooperation. And within ourselves, when rational and informed, we should all want to be this sort of person in our own moral lives, because otherwise our behavior will be self-defeating in our interactions with others, and because upon any rationally honest confrontation with who we are, we will despise ourselves when we become the sort of person we despise, and not the sort of person we like to live near and interact with. Psychological science has shown that hiding behind lies to avoid either of these realizations is ineffectual, because everyone needs to be rational to achieve what they want, and that always entails being honest with oneself and not hiding from the truth with false beliefs. I provide a starter bibliography of the relevant science I'm referring to here in my peer-reviewed study for the journal Religions, titled Objective Moral Facts Exist in All Possible Universes. And that includes science establishing the deep dissatisfactions we've documented of even narcissists and sociopaths, compared to the more readily accessible satisfactions of the honest and caring. But key starting points on that include Roger Bergman's Why Be Moral, Walter Sinnott Armstrong's series on moral psychology, and the recent analysis of Stephen Morris, The Complex Relationship Between Morality and Happiness Around the World, which shows that liberal moralities correlate with happier people, while conservative moralities correlate with more miserable people, evincing a direct link between empathy and trustworthiness and every individual's best interests. So, both prongs of secular humanism need to be understood in their different functions. What secular humanism finds to be the best government, and what it finds to be the best way to behave and live, which are not identical. The one must be a certain way to allow the other. When we apply reason to the evidence, we discover that governments should only exist to maintain a civil society in which everyone can pursue their own lives according to their own worldviews, and only managing conflicts between them in the interest of maintaining civility, especially through peace and justice. And by only evidence-based policies, people are then free to advocate for, live by, their own moral conscience. This is what the UN means by respecting rights being essential to ensuring peace and justice, and by the freedom to conduct ourselves in whatever way our reason decides, so long as it is compatible with the civil society needed to maintain those freedoms in the first place. This is the right to speak and think freely, the right to believe in whatever religion or philosophy you choose, the right of association, the right to an equal say in who constructs and manages our government, the right to not lose our life, liberty, or property without due process of law, the right to access food and water and shelter. These are examples of the kinds of rights we have empirically proved necessary for maintaining peace and justice, which everyone needs in order to have reliable access to emotional and material prosperity. Whenever we do it the other way around and coerce an entire morality or worldview on a society, which has to be in disregard of producing and maintaining a civil society, it always ends in a loss of peace and justice, and in result, a widespread loss of prosperity and well-being. So we know empirically why we need a limited government, and not a moralistic one, a government maximizing freedoms as far as won't impair them, to ensure a stable civil society as a backdrop for everyone to experiment and debate and embrace ways of living. While that common government, which we also empirically know to be successful, must serve everyone, not just a select few, and collect and allocate resources at the decision of its shareholders, the people. Because governments are just corporations serving the people with their own bylaws and boards of directors, and every citizen owns one share and thus has one vote, so no one has more power than another. It thus needs to be neutral as to individual morals and worldview, and only intervene when conflict threatens life, liberty, or property, and only in response to evidence, not to ideology. Everything else is fascism, and fascism always ends badly. I recommend a well-sourced video on that by Digital Gnosis, Fascism, and Christian Nationalism. So our founders tried to build our government so that it wouldn't collapse into that failure mode, because as soon as you allow the state to dictate morality and worldview, it's just a matter of time before you get outvoted and morals and worldviews you hate get installed to control you instead. The only way to avoid this is to build a government that is robustly neutral about private ways of life, treating everyone the same, which means not equally, because everyone in their circumstances may differ, but equitably, and which means not in disregard of the evidence and the aim of general human good, but in response to them. And then you should exercise your protected freedom to live your life by the morals you find right, as long as you respect everyone else's rights and thus maintain a civil society of peace and justice. And on that, secular humanism applies the same two principles: human well-being before all else, and only what evidence and reason prove serves that end. So thank you for hearing me out, and I hope you will explore these ideas and the evidence for them further outside of this debate. Don't just believe me or Andrew. Fact-check everything we say here and on, so you can come to your own informed and rational conclusion. And otherwise, thank you for having me here to make this presentation. So.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that opening statement. And just a reminder, folks, if you can check your cell phone just to be sure that it's off, we'll kick it over to Andrew for his 15-minute opening statement as well. The floor is all yours, Andrew.
Yeah, thanks. This actually won't take 15 minutes. I'm kind of eager to get into the back and forth with Mr. Carrier. First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for coming out. It's very kind of you to do and doing this debate with me. Round of applause, huh? I know Smoky Man bad, but you may have been misinformed. So I'm just going to kind of go through a few of these things. I saved my opening just to kind of combat. I knew that my opponent would have kind of a lengthy one. I have a very simple argument today. But he says secular humanism defined as maximizing human well-being. Only humans matter, and there are 1,000 denominations of Christianity. Well, the problem is he's at the mercy of the same exact argument. There are thousands of different ideals around what is the secularism of the future. These ideas that people have are often contrary to each other. You could argue, for instance, that communism is a form of secular humanism, which I'm guessing that my opponent probably doesn't want communism. He says, secularists gave us the Constitution, but then he goes on to say that half of it was based on the Ten Commandments, which I thought was pretty funny. Note that the Constitution also puts bumpers on democracy. That's what it does, right? We're a republic, not a democracy. And that's what Christian nationalists are advocating for, too, bumpers on democracy. So we both want the same thing there. I guess Mr. Carrier probably doesn't trust the electorate any more than we do, or you wouldn't put those bumpers on, right? So he says we can compare results. When Christians are in charge, they start wars. And I just want to note that the United States, the thing that he references, has been essentially at war nonstop since its founding, including the more secular it gets. So it doesn't seem like, at least here, that the evidence supports that. He kind of looks at a few other things too, like removing religion and replacing it with reason and evidence. I'd like to see how we get to an ought for that exactly. I would like to point out that reason and evidence-based secularism has also led to things like the sexual revolution, things like 18-year-olds going and selling their ass on OnlyFans, essentially, and problems with outsourcing childcare away from the mother and back to the, basically to either state care or having to outsource it away from the mother, which has led to terrible results. So I'm not sure that secularism actually gives us the things that he's stating that it gives us. He says the more Christian any democratic state gets, it's usually worse in things like crime and other things. I would actually argue that mass migration causes most of these issues, not Christianity. And it's also very rational not to have mass migration, by the way. He says rational-based human reason, and he says testing. Oh, I'm sorry. Hang on a second. I'm just reading my notes here. So, he sources game theory. Can't wait to get into that, by the way. Peace and justice in the world is possible only through reason, and that's what gives people freedom, justice, and peace. I think that that's something that we need to look at, too. He says psychology science shows hiding behind laws cause issues. That's interesting, but secular humanists hide behind laws when it comes to basic things like sex. They'll say things are true that aren't true. For instance, like men can be women, things like this. Liberal societies have happier people and religious societies have less happy people, yet every study I've seen shows that at least individually that's not the case. The more secular a person is, the more mentally ill they tend to become or have bad outcomes associated with them. So, right to believe, he says, a right to association. Do you actually believe in a right to association? I'm not so sure if we get into that you're going to actually believe in a right to associate. He says coercing an entire morality, that's bad because it always results in peace and prosperity when you don't do that. I would just note that a lot of these people in the more secular nations suffer from suicidal empathy. and they do crazy things that have no reason, like mass migration. He also says everything else is fascism, and then he quotes digital gnosis, a guy I know, by the way. And I would like to know what Carrier thinks fascism is. So he says government should treat everybody with equity, another thing I'd like to get into. My basic argument is just this. So if people believe there to be an invisible being that will punish them for wrongdoing, then they will be more likely to both avoid the bad behaviors and promote others to avoid bad behaviors. Seems like a very simple, logical argument. And I'm not really sure that my opponent's going to be able to refute it. So one thing I'll say about Richard, he's forgotten more about history than I'll ever know. But I'm not so sure on philosophy that that's the case. So with that, I'd like to just get right into it when you guys are ready.
I wanted to take a moment to say thank you to our friends at Maine First Project for sponsoring DebateCon 6, as they also believe in the values of free speech and fair debate. Maine First Project is fighting for conservatism in New England and beyond, so check out their link in the description box below. We're going to jump into the open dialogue. The floor is yours, gentlemen.
Yeah, so can we just start with what you think fascism is?
Do I have audio? Is it working?
Sean.
Oh, hold on. Maybe I need to bring it to my house. Here we go. All right. Simplest definition. Fascism is the use of force rather than persuasion and democracy to affect your political will.
And did you make that definition up?
It's based on what everybody else, historians and so forth, talk about. It's the most reduced definition.
It's just, I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I got it right. Use of force?
Use of force rather than persuasion and democracy to affect your political will.
So we're not talking about historical fascism here.
All historical fascism. If it's properly called fascism, it fits that model.
Okay. So does the United States do this?
What do you mean? Does the United States do what?
Yeah, use force rather than, I'm sorry.
No, we have democracy. We actually have a say in what the government does.
Well,
usually. I mean,
you can't vote directly on things, right?
No, but you vote for your representative who votes for you.
Okay.
It's the same thing.
Got
it's
it.
just like a corporation. When you vote for the board of directors, you can control the board of directors by your vote.
Yeah.
And so you get an equal say in what happens.
Let me make sure I write this down. I just want to make sure I got it right. One more time with the definition.
So use of force rather than persuasion and democracy
rather than
to affect
persuasion
political will.
and democracy. Got it. I'm sorry, I don't want to straw man any of your positions,
Sure,
right?
yeah.
Rather than
If you want like an
persuasion
example,
and democracy.
my whole discussion was about the importance of rights to maintaining a stable society. Fascist governments use force rather than use force to suppress rights rather than to maintain them.
So like the Second Amendment, for instance?
For instance?
Yeah, for instance. So let's take a
The
look. The use of force rather than persuasion and democracy.
Yeah,
Let's just start with this, right? Inside of democracy, at least the current one that we have, you want bumpers put on it. You don't want direct democracy, right?
Well, we need a rights-based democracy. So I do think direct democracy can work if you actually have the rights-based model. The main reason representative democracy works better, and this is based on evidence, is that representatives can actually, they're paid to have all the time to actually do all the research necessary to make the best decisions in terms of law. And so the average person doesn't have the time or means to do that. So they elect someone to do that for them. And so that actually works better. And so that's evidence-based reason. We should follow what the evidence dictates is the best way to organize.
Yeah, so do you agree with me that the government does try to use, they try to use propaganda, persuasion, things like that? Is that acceptable in this worldview? Or is that fascism as well?
Yeah, I don't know what you're using as your definition of those things. I actually disagree with the government engaging in open propaganda, and it's technically illegal. But the government does have to correctly inform us about evidence-based facts, so and about the laws and things like that. So the government does have to do things like that, but that's all evidence-based and is necessary for maintaining our freedoms.
Gotcha. Okay, so back to this. Now I think I got some clarity on some things. So use of force rather than persuasion and democracy. Don't you think that the American government utilizes force all the time? Constantly, in fact.
Illegally, yeah. The government violates this principle.
Well, legally. It legally does, right?
It legally uses, when it's doing it legally, it's doing it in aid of supporting these freedoms, right? So like that, as I discussed in the thing,
What?
freedoms can't go forever. When freedoms start to conflict, you have to resolve the conflict. And if that resorts to the point where you have to use violence to stop that conflict, normally, like, we have a lot of other ways to resolve that conflict. So violence is the last resort, generally.
Yeah, but the problem is you say use of force rather than persuasion in democracy. Like, I don't know, if there's a protest going on, the government comes in, they shut it down, they're using the force of the state.
I agree. That's
Is that fascism?
So it depends on particular cases, but sometimes it's not fascism because the government itself isn't fully fascist yet. But it is illegal and it is contrary to the principles that I'm arguing. So it is trending towards fascism if we allow that to continue. But sometimes it is actually justified. So it depends on the cases as to what you're talking about.
Okay, so any government which uses force rather than persuasion in democracy, when you say fully fascist, what does that mean? Like, they just always use force rather than persuasion in democracy?
when it's actually codified as the law.
Okay.
Right? So, like, if the government's breaking the law, it's heading towards fascism.
Okay.
When it makes the violent things that it does that are inappropriate, when it makes those things legal, then it's a fascist state.
Okay.
So we're not there yet, but
All right.
there's a risk of it.
I feel like I got your
And that
def-
is exactly what
yeah.
the Founding Fathers wanted to prevent. They wanted to prevent exactly that outcome. And the organization of the Constitution was built to prevent that from happening. And so the fact that when presidents start ignoring the Constitution, that's extremely dangerous because it's starting to head towards that failure mode I talked about. And we don't want that.
Yeah, but you're not, I mean, you don't really believe in the Constitution, right? You only believe in the Constitution that you like? Because the original Constitution doesn't look much like the one we currently have, right?
Well, remember in my opening I said one of the things that the first principle that we actually have to admit once we adopt secular humanism, evidence-based reasoning, humans first, is that we have to admit that sometimes we get things wrong. And so we actually do have to learn and improve and get rid of bad ideas and replace them with good ones. So, and the Constitution actually has that built into it. It actually admits that some of it in there could be wrong and might need amendments, and so it kept having amendments, and here we are.
Yeah, so but this is really interesting, right? Because you are putting bumpers on democracy. What you're doing is you're setting a set. So the set is, well, we can have democracy, but only within the limits of things I think are good.
Yeah, isn't
that actually the case?
So I think you might be mistaking me for saying that I believe that, like, democracy is somehow ideologically
No. I just want to make sure I got it right?
Yeah,
so I'm not going to straw man the position, but
right.
what
So
you're doing is you're saying
you
there's
need a
set.
rights-based democracy. You can't just have a democracy.
Yeah.
Because we know empirically when you don't have the rights-based part of it, bad outcomes occur. So you need that, just like we need a combination, and I know a lot of people probably don't agree with me on this. I don't think a purely capitalist society is anything but going to end up in a failure mode. I don't think a purely Marxist society is going to end up in anything but a failure mode.
Okay.
And so we need a hybrid economy. We need socialism and capitalism working as checks and balances against each other to prevent their excesses.
Yeah, but I get it. But what
And
you're still advocating
I'm using that
here,
as an analogy to democracy. So democracy and the protection of the constitutional
But
basis of
what you're
rights, they're checks and balances against each other. So
but
the
what you're
rights-based
still
system,
doing is giving us sets. You're giving us
so it makes
sets of things that
empirically better outcome is to have that.
Yeah, but you're just giving us sets in democracy of you're allowed to do these democratic things within sets that you think are good. That is what you're saying.
What were you saying, sects or sets?
Sets. Like a
Sets.
set. So if it's the case, for instance, that we have democracy, but we don't have what you perceive as rights we need, that's not a democracy that you would want.
A democracy that doesn't respect rights?
Yeah.
Correct.
And you would want
because we empirically know that
yeah,
doesn't
and you would
work.
want safeguards against that.
Yeah, you have to have that control. That's why you need a rights-based democracy, not just a democracy.
Okay, so you're going to oppress choice for people on purpose in order to create these bumpers, right?
Yeah, of course.
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
all Christian nationalists are doing too. They're
No,
creating
that's
hang on.
that's not
Hang on,
what
let me
they're
make the
doing.
argument. It is what they're doing. They're creating bumpers. For instance, let's just start
Well, they're
with
not
this.
just creating bumpers.
Well,
they're creating non-evidence-based bumpers that actually lead to
Well,
bad
they're not
outcomes.
non-evidence based. Like, for instance, can you tell me in your secular humanist society, is prostitution legal?
I believe it should be.
Yeah, of course.
It
And
should
do you
be-
believe
it
that?
should be legal and regulated the same way
Yeah.
the food industry
Sure.
is?
And do you
I
think?
have a whole article on this. You can
And-
check it out on my blog.
Okay,
It's,
and what age should women be allowed to be prostitutes?
well, adults, obviously.
What age is that?
18.
Okay, so you think that 18 years old, women should be able to be prostitutes, right?
Sure.
Inside of your secular humanist society. How is that going to create better outcomes for the world?
So we actually have comparisons of states that have legal prostitution and states that have illegal prostitution. A good example is Nevada. Nevada actually has some of the lowest STD rates in the country. And one of the reasons is because the prostitution there is regulated to engage in safe sex. So because prostitutes are often the vectors for STDs and the prostitutes there are cleaner, because it's a legal regulated thing, we have a better outcome. And in fact, it's just as good as the food industry or anything else.
Would you just regulate all vice?
Yeah, you got to regulate things within the same principles of what actually works to protect people from harm.
I see. And these are sets of harms which you think people ought to follow.
As long as they don't create more harm, like regulating creates more harm than the
but
harm
isn't
supposed
this
to
very
regulate, then obviously it's not evidence-based
Yeah, but
anymore.
isn't this very idea of harm that you have just arbitrary and based on your own preferences?
No, I actually made a good case for it based on, we have all of these elements of the evidence we have from history of what systems work better. We have the evidence of what people actually like and don't like, when people don't want to be poor, don't want to be oppressed.
Yeah, but that's based on your preference still. The idea
everybody's
is like this is
Yeah.
a preferable state of affairs for you.
For all human beings. All rational human beings will agree with these things.
What
all
about
rational, informed human beings.
Yeah, so like take Nevada, for instance. It is true the STD rates are lower, but human trafficking's higher. How is that better? And by the way, if you take a look at many of these countries where you see human trafficking going on, guess what? It's directly correlated to prostitution, which is legal and illegal, including OnlyFans.
Yeah, I don't know about your statistics on that. Let's just assume that that's true. That isn't caused by legal prostitution, because that's the opposite of that, right?
It is actually.
So if you think it's caused by legal prostitution, then what you're arguing for is that the government should be more regulating of the industry, which is perfectly sensible.
Well, yeah, and they can regulate it by making it illegal.
Yeah, but that's
a great regulation. Like, oh, hey, you know what's really great about this? We can just make it illegal.
It has all the negative effects of hurting a bunch of people. It's a worse outcome.
Who is it going to hurt? How is it going to really hurt 18-year-olds? How is this a better world that you are postulating, that 18-year-olds can prostitute themselves on the internet because you think that what they're going to do it? They're going to do it anyway.
No, they can do what they want. That's the thing. It's freedom. It's not the government's business to tell them what to do with
I think,
their own
well, see,
lives.
but here's where we deviate, right? Why is it not, especially according to you, when I look at what your definition is like, it does seem like it is the government's business to regulate these things. It's absolutely their business.
Only to the pursuit of harm. So
the pursuit of harm. 18-year-olds having sex on the internet is very harmful.
Let me answer your question earlier, where you asked about like what would be the benefit. There are actually several. But I'll just go into the one example that we're bringing so far. Legalizing prostitution reduces STD rates. And it reduces STD rates not just in people who are frequenting prostitutes. It spreads throughout the society so that even innocent people, by your definition, who aren't engaging in prostitution are actually being protected from STDs.
Yeah, and do we have some of the highest STD rates in the world right now with all of your free love, free sex? Don't stay out of my bedroom.
Do you know what correlates with STD rates around the world and in this country? Christianity.
Oh, I see.
The more Christian states have more STDs, the more Christian countries have more STDs.
So do you think that when this place was a lot more Christian, there were a lot more STDs?
Well, if we don't have data on that, I don't know. But
the answer is no. Hang on.
I'm talking about the data right now.
Yeah, I'm talking about the data right now, too.
Rates, so we can show that there's a correlation between how Christian a country is and how many STDs there are. And therefore, the more secular the country, the fewer STDs there are.
No, actually, when we parse this is crazy, actually. I would never expect you to make this argument. If you're talking about the more Christian an area is, the more STD it is, if we chalk this up between minority and non-minority, that's the case. And so this is what's really interesting about this.
No,
I bet most of the countries...
It's cross-country.
Yeah, but...
To other countries. It's same in Sweden, when you compare Sweden to the U.S.
I bet most of the countries...
compare Japan to the U.S.
Are most of the countries that you're going to be making a comparison to, where the STD rates really start to climb up, going to be third world nations who are Christian?
Well, third world nations aren't necessarily free democracies. That varies. So that's not really a relevant comparison here. So, but no, these are the studies. The studies show that when you have a more Christian society... whether it's state or country, whether it's Finland, for example.
Do you think we had
You can't blame STDs on minorities.
Well, I got it.
The statistics don't support that.
This is wild to me. Do you think that we were more or less of a Christian country in 1945?
Do you think? I think we're less of a Christian country now.
I agree. So
Yeah.
if that's the
As
case,
if we're talking about
shouldn't
the
we see
population.
way more STDs in 1945 than we do right now?
I don't know because I don't know the data on that.
Oh, well, there was...
But what would matter...
Wait, hang on. If I could demonstrate for you, if we just look at the historic STD rates, and we're seeing the STD rates grow, and this is attributed to things like sex work and promiscuity, especially sexual revolution since the 70s. Imagine this, Richard. I can just logically demonstrate this for you. Are people having more or less sex now that they have condoms, birth control, vasectomies, would you say?
Oh, yeah, definitely, probably having
And
more
what
sex,
would you
I assume.
correlate higher than sex for STDs? Anything?
Well, you can look at this where you see the military. You look at the military in World War II, the STD rates in our soldiers compared to the military now, it's down a lot. So
Because they regulate sex. They regulate.
No.
Yeah. Well, yes, they
soldiers
do.
can have as much sex, even more sex now
Wait
than
a
they did back
second.
then.
Wait a second.
So
Let's back up. Let's make sure we got this right. Okay. So if it is the case that we go back to 1945, you say it's a more Christian country then, right? There's less STDs. You agree with me that it is the case that the correlation of STD, the highest one's going to be sexual
Yeah.
intercourse. People are having more sexual intercourse, especially since the sexual revolution.
You got to be careful here because to do a correct comparison, you actually need to compare like with like. So there are conditions that change between...
we are Christian, less Christian. Like with like.
No, but I'm just saying that there are other conditions, economic, population size, all these other conditions that can affect the relationship.
What could
So
possibly be
if
more
we
of a
wanna know-
correlate than penis and vagina? What?
Lots of things.
Well,
Access
for an
to sex,
STD?
access to prostitutes, access to sex, access to other partners, and so on. All
Hang
sorts
on,
of
hang on.
things.
If we completely...
There are lots of things that can change this. So if you
Isn't
wanna,
it, hang on, Richard,
if you
isn't
wanna
it the
know
case if we eliminated
if you wanna know if-
sexual intercourse, there would not be STDs no more?
I'm sorry, say that again?
If we eliminated sexual intercourse, nobody's having sex, there are no more STDs, right?
Sure.
Okay, great.
But the problem is that then that creates a greater harm if you're preventing everyone from
Yeah,
having sex.
no, I understand.
So
that's not my...
evidence-based, human-centered reasoning would
but
deny
that's-
that
that's
as
not
an
my point.
irrational move.
Yeah, that's not my point. My point is that this idea that you have that STDs, right, don't increase even though the population is having
Yeah.
a lot more sex because you're telling the population that it's fine to have a lot more sex because this God
you're
creature...
wrong. You're scientifically wrong. And I can...
How am I
so there's-
scientifically wrong?
I'll give you an example. There's
Okay.
studies of polyamorous couples. The rate of STDs among monogamous couples is actually higher than the rate of STDs among polyamorous couples. Polyamorous couples are having way more sex than the monogamous people. Why is their STD rate down? Because they engage in safe sex. So that's the thing. You can't have that kind of correlation. If you're acting like a secular humanist, you're going to act in a rational way, and therefore you're going to evidence-based way. You're going to engage in safe sex, and therefore that's what we should promote. We should be teaching safe sex skills and so forth. So that, and that actually also has been shown when you actually teach people safe sex, they actually have less STDs.
Hang on,
Less teen pregnancy.
What demographic do you think is the most polyamorous? Would you say homosexuals?
I don't know.
Homosexuals, Richard?
So the relevant metric would be
Richard,
numbers.
is it homosexuals?
So, no, you're asking about rate, but you're talking about raw numbers.
No,
there
I'm just
are
asking you, are there more polyamorous people
Yes.
who are... Yes, thank you.
No.
And
No.
what are the STD
No,
rates
no.
of those polyamorous people?
No. You're wrong. There are more heterosexual polyamorous people because by raw
I'm talking
numbers.
about per capita, clearly.
Yeah, by raw numbers. Per capita doesn't make your argument, though. By
Yes,
raw
it actually
numbers-
does. What I'm saying is that if you have if it's polyamorous people, you're saying have less STDs. If it is the case that when we look at homosexuals who are the most polyamorous, they have the most STDs, what are you talking about?
But
dude?
you aren't counting the polyamorous, like the actual polyamorous homosexuals, rather than just...
We can literally do it right now. Do you want me to go through and show you?
Actual
Yes, of course.
homosexuals practicing
This is
safe
not
sex. You have a stat showing homosexuals practicing
Well,
safe
no,
sex
see, the thing is
compared
they
to not
have the
having
most
safe
amount
sex.
of sex. That's why they have the most amount of STDs.
But the example I gave shows that you can have way more sex and get less STDs. And so if that works in one population,
Actually,
it'll
you
work in
haven't.
every
You haven't
population.
demonstrated that. You just said it.
No,
but the thing.
there's a study you can.
Oh,
find.
there's a
You
study.
can Google
Where?
it.
From who? Let me look at it because that
Absolutely.
is.
So
yeah.
Anybody can Google it. You just go Googling it, try to find STD rates compared between polyamorous and monogamous people. So, just as I said in my opening, you don't have to believe what I'm saying. You don't have to believe what he's saying. You can go find this stuff yourself. And so all we're doing is informing you of that. And so you know what to go look for in this. And this is a thing. So it proves that safe sex reduces STDs even with increased sexual activity.
But it, I
So
mean,
the
but it
lesson
doesn't
there-
because if we
the
look at the
lesson there is to promote safe sex,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
It's not to suppress, like send cops in to beat the shit out of you.
Mhm.
Like we don't need Stonewall to get STDs down. We just
Okay.
need to have people who actually act responsibly, and we teach them how to do that, give them the skills and the means and access to that stuff.
Well,
It also
let's-
lowers teen
yeah.
pregnancy. It lowers all the metrics that you're thinking of.
Yeah, let's just make sure that we get this right. I want to get into the argument now so we don't get too derailed. When we start with how do you think it is possible, okay, that if it is the case that there is an invisible being that will punish people for wrongdoing, that they will be more likely to avoid the bad behaviors and promote others to avoid bad behaviors?
We know for a fact that that's not the case. So the statistics show the more Christians are actually Christians are 3 times more likely to be teen mothers or single mothers than atheists. So,
But isn't that
obviously
because
it's not-
atheists are more likely to
obviously
abort their kids?
the Christian help is not.
Isn't that why?
No.
No?
There's no evidence of that.
There isn't?
Yeah, no.
Okay.
So, and this is the other thing, is like all the other markers follow country by country, state by state. The more Christian, the more we have STDs and teen pregnancy. So obviously Christianity is not curing the problem. Whereas you look at the more secular states, it's actually being the secular state that is curing the problem. That's why Sweden is so much better off than us on these metrics. It's not because of promotion of Christianity, it's by promotion of secular humanist ideals.
Well, Richard, since atheists, it's like 91% of them are pro-choice, right? Why do you think that they would be less likely to get an abortion than people who aren't pro-choice?
So a lot of people say they're pro-choice and then go have an abortion. So you have to actually count who's really doing it, not what they say.
Yeah, I know, but we're just going down to likelihoods here. So do you think that it's more likely that a person who believes and is pro-choice...
You have to go measure it.
I'm
right?
asking you about likelihoods, Richard. Do you think that
I can't
it's...
tell you likelihoods without doubt.
How can
You got to have evidence.
logical.
You need evidence.
Logically, do you think it's logically
You need
likely?
evidence. If you're not reasoning from evidence, we're wasting time here. So
Okay, well
need
then how can you
evidence.
make... If that's the case, then how can you make the claim that one or the other is less or more likely? You can't?
When I have evidence, then
That's
I can
it?
say it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, that's
okay.
how you decide
St-
everything.
I just want to make sure it's
You
just...
need
That's it?
evidence-based reasoning. If you don't have the
Uh-huh.
evidence, you can't make the claim. So
Okay.
You need your positions to be based on the evidence and what actually happens. And so you actually have to go study. You have to actually go count. You can't just sit from the armchair and come up with these ideas. That doesn't work as a method. And that's one of the reasons why the Christian worldview is not best for society.
Okay.
We need a rational worldview that's evidence-based.
Got it.
That actually respects evidence as the fundamental authority, the highest authority.
So studies...
That will make society better
Okay.
by all metrics, including
Studies
ones we're
showing
talking
that all areas with legal sex work increase human trafficking inflows. Countries with legalized prostitution reported 20 to 30% higher trafficking inflows than those where it's criminalized, according to the United Nations Office on Drug and Crime. STD rates are lower in most Christian majority countries. Isn't that interesting? Driven by wealth and systems rather than faith. I'll give you that point, but it doesn't take away from mine.
Yeah.
If anything,
that's
highly
why
religious
you have to
hang on,
control.
highly religious
You have to
Christians,
control
hang
for
on,
those other
hang on,
variables.
I'm trying. If anything, highly religious Christian subgroups show the protective effects. STDs are not more prevalent in Christian countries. In fact, the evidence points to the opposite. Christian majority nations, particularly those in Europe and the Americas, generally have lower STD rates than non-Christian majority countries, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, parts of Asia.
Yes, wrong comparisons, right?
Yeah, well, this isn't being a direct comparison to
we need to
secular
talk-
nations, but most of these, there's not any nations which are
Secular
purely
humanist-
secular.
Secular humanist nations have to be free democratic nations. Otherwise, they're not secular and they're not humanist.
Okay, yeah, but so the Christian nations, the Christian
Well-
Western nations.
Well, so first of all, you can't include states that aren't free democracies because they have completely different metrics for what's going on. And then secondly, you can't include highly impoverished countries because obviously you have completely different metrics going on there. So what you have to compare is like with like. So you have to look at free developed nations.
So I just want to make sure. I think we're coming to the point of the debate where we can start to have a real good argument here. I heard you say that you think that you can get oughts from ISs. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you tell me how?
Yes. So if a surgeon wants to save the life of a patient, he ought to sterilize his instruments. And this can be scientifically proven as true. You can prove scientifically that the desire exists, and you can prove scientifically that the prescribed action will actually satisfy the desire. And in fact, that's called a hypothetical imperative. Philippa Foot has argued for, like, first of all, even Immanuel Kant agreed hypothetical imperatives can be proven scientifically. They're empirical facts.
So you think
and
Hume...
Philip Afoot argues that all morality is just hypothetical imperatives.
So you think Hume is wrong?
Well, Hume didn't say the thing that I think he said. So do you want me to go over that?
Yeah, Hume is saying mere is.
Say it again?
Mere is. A mere is.
I'm not understanding.
Well, so what you're doing is you're taking things that are hypothetically loaded with oughts already. And that's the problem.
No.
Hang on. Yeah, hang on. Let me make the case. You are. Yeah, what Hume is,
No.
Hume is talking about a mere is. So, like, the door is cold. How do I get an ought from that?
Yeah, so Hume said that he didn't say that you can't derive an ought from an is. What he said was that religious people, Christians, were not doing that they were just ordering things. They were not demonstrating that the ought comes from the is. And that's what Kant actually did, is he showed that hypothetical imperatives, you can do that, and you are doing that. So the ought comes from the is. The is what is your desire?
Again, I'm going to ask you the question. The door,
what best achieves the desire.
The door is cold. How do I get an ought from that?
Well, that particularly, you're missing half of the question. So, like, you would have to know what is the desire that relates to that. And then you have to rationally order the desires.
No, it's because that's a mere is. It's a mere is statement.
Yeah, but you can't derive an imperative without referring to a goal.
That's because it's a mere is.
No, that's... Well, yeah,
no,
yes.
it's because it's a mere is.
Yes, but
hang on, you got this wrong.
Look, imperative propositions
Yeah.
are built out of two facts, two actual objective facts.
Mm-hmm.
A goal and a means to the goal. So just describing a doorknob doesn't describe any goals, so you can't get an imperative out of
because
that.
It's a mere is.
And it's therefore irrelevant.
No, it's therefore the most relevant.
No,
if you have a mere is statement...
You can't get imperatives without goals.
Yes, that's
so
what Hume is saying. Hume
exactly.
is applying this to a mere
Yeah.
is. Why are you saying exactly? You just disagreed with me 5 seconds
No,
ago.
he agrees with me on this.
No, he didn't agree with you on this. He's talking about a mere
You're
is.
skipping the goal. This makes no sense. No, Hume was saying that once you have... And that's why he actually developed his moral system based on human sentiment. So it's based on what you want, and therefore in the rational ordering of desires... you have to have the goal.
What is Hume's guillotine?
Goal plus the facts equals imperatives,
Yeah.
and that's how you get hypothetical.
What is
imperatives.
Hume's guillotine?
Say again?
What is Hume's guillotine?
What is Hume's...
Hume's guillotine.
Guillotine?
Yes.
Are you talking about the thing we're talking about right now?
I'm asking you what Hume's guillotine is.
Well, you describe it.
You can just say you don't know.
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, so you don't know.
Yeah,
okay, that's
I
okay.
don't remember. I've heard of it, but
Yeah.
I can't remember.
For
Unless
as
it's the
this
same
ought
thing.
or ought not expresses some new relation or
Yeah, it's the same
affirmation,
thing, right,
it
yeah.
is necessary that it should be observed and explained, and at the same time that a reason should be given
Yeah.
for what seems altogether inconceivable. How this new relation can be a deduction from others which are entirely different from it. He's referencing a mere is.
Yeah, and then he goes on to explain that the mere is once you get a goal is the is, then you actually get the result.
Well, that's because the goal is the ought. You're conflating. So this is the problem that you're conflating here.
You're talking about values versus ought.
Well,
ought derives from values. They're not identical, right? Like you have a value.
So you wait.
What you ought to do can depend on your value.
So
They're not
how are we getting
identical.
the ought from the is here?
So oughts come out of the combination of two things: a goal, you call it values, and the means. Right. So like whatever the facts are in terms of what best achieves that goal is then the true ought regarding that. So you have to have the goal. And so the question is, how do you get moral goals?
But that's already loaded with ought.
No.
Yes.
You're starting with values.
What do you think ought?
Values don't have oughts.
Richard,
in them.
what do you
have
think
a
ought means here?
Just a value by itself
Yeah.
is like a doorknob. It doesn't entail anything. The value by itself, in conjunction with the facts of the world, then derives the ought. So they're not identical. The ought is a derivation of two facts.
Yeah, but the is not giving you that ought. Some
Two
other
ises.
category
The
is.
goal is a fact. It's an is, and the means is an actual fact as well. So you have two facts.
Wait.
But you have to have both facts. This is like
Help me.
basic
Hang on.
stuff.
No. You got to help me out with this one. I guess I'm a little slow. How could it be the case that if you have a goal, right? I have a goal, right?
Yeah.
Ought you do that goal?
Yeah. Say again.
Ought you do that goal?
Okay, now that's you can't answer that question just by itself. Just with the value, you can't answer that question. You need the facts. So that gets to rational ordering of values, and this is another thing that Hume talks about. Is that
So then the is statement here,
Yeah,
right,
which-
is again moving back
you're
to a
asking
mere
the question
is.
like which value should you have?
Yeah.
Right. But if we set that aside for a moment,
Yeah.
as soon as you have a value, then there are true ought statements that derive from that value. Now, the question is, What is the rational ordering?
No, there's not true ought statements that derive
Yeah,
from.
so like as soon as the doctor wants to save the patient, he ought to sterilize his instruments. The ought immediately follows from the combination.
Yeah, but do you see you already entailed the ought in the is?
No.
The doctors wants to do X.
I think you're doing a semantic thing here. Like
It is, semantics are important when we're about to talk about what we ought to do with society.
The ought is a combination of two facts, and you keep confusing the ought with one of those facts.
No, I'm saying that what you are doing here is you're preloading, right? You're taking a statement.
It
Yes,
derives
you
from
are.
two facts, neither of which is an ought.
No.
Now,
Well,
if you want to get to
it's
like
a mere.
order-
It's a mere is.
What-
You're actually.
what I think
I can
I-
actually demonstrate this for you.
What I think, let me see if I get this right as to what you're trying to get at. Is you don't object to the fact that oughts can derive from an is once you accept the goal. What you're asking is, how do we decide which goals we ought to have?
No, let's back up.
Okay.
Okay, so let's start with this.
Which is the two things?
Yeah,
which of
how
those
do
two
you get
things?
when you say, right, a doctor, he's going to save a patient, right?
He wants to
He
save a
wants to
patient.
save a patient, right? Well, that's already the ought, right?
No, it's not.
Yes. Why does he want to save him then?
So no,
Why he thinks it's an ought, right?
An ought actually has to have two pieces. So this is a semantic fact about what the word imperative language requires. It requires a value, a goal, and the facts, and you derive the ought is sterilize the instruments. The ought is not want to save the patient. It could be, but once you accept, you just for whatever reason we haven't justified why the doctor wants to do this or that he should do this or that. Once he has the desire to do this, an ought is automatically.
Do you see,
entailed.
like, if you said, I don't know, all Christians, right? They should go to church. Or you just say, like, I'm a Christian, and so the ought there is you must go to church. That's even better. The ought there is you must go to church because that's entailed with Christianity. You can't be a Christian if you're not going to church. Can't save the patient unless you're using the instrument. Hang on.
I don't think that's true.
You
I
can't
think
save
lots
the-
of Christians don't believe you have to go to church.
Yeah, but
to
let's
be a
just say
Christian.
that was the agreement of what the definition of
Sure,
a Christian
yeah.
is. Okay, is that you have to go to church or you can't be a real Christian, right? You're
Sure,
saying
let's
so
assume
you
everybody agrees
So
to
you
that,
ought
yeah.
go to church based on that is, right?
Yeah, but notice.
But
the,
no.
the ought is not identical to the is. The ought is derived.
No,
from two
you're
different
loading
ises.
this to something
So
past
you're
mere is.
conflating the
No.
the value with the ought. So the ought is
Okay.
sterilize the instruments. The value is wanting to
No,
save
that's
the
a
patient.
you're
Wanting to save the
mistaking. You're
patient is
mistaking
not
here with a
sterilizing
mere
instruments.
is.
Sterilizing instruments is the ought, not the wanting to save the patient.
No, there's no ought entailed there unless it's a mere is. Otherwise, you
No,
already are
it
giving
is
the
entailed.
ought.
The ought, sterilized instruments, is logically necessarily entailed by the value to the desire. The desire is to save the
Because there's already an ought.
No, there
Yes.
doesn't have to be.
Yes.
So I think
Although it's a mere is statement is what we're looking at.
No,
I mean,
no.
I can demonstrate this for you a million
That's why
times.
I was trying to ask if you wanted to get at two different questions here. It sounds like you're confusing the two.
I'm not
questions.
confusing it.
Yeah, you're definitely confusing.
I'm
it
definitely
because
not.
You keep switching between two arguments.
No, I'm switching.
So
I'm only using
it sounds
one.
like you want to have the ought for the why ought the doctor want to save the patient? That's a different imperative. That's a different ought statement from what the doctor should do once he does desire.
Because you're already loading the ought in it.
No, there's no ought
Yes.
in there. It's just the desire.
It's a mere look.
All
what
it is a
what
desire.
Hume's,
It's not an ought. A
what
desire
Hume's
is not an
guillotine is
ought.
talking about is mere is statement. The door is
Yeah, I think-
cold.
yeah,
the door
I
is cold. You
definitely
can't get an
think-
ought from that, right?
I think you're obfuscating here, and I think
I don't think I'm
So
obfuscating.
would you give me a moment to explain that?
Yeah.
So I can actually, so your audience can hear this. So
Okay.
I want to give you a chance as well, but then
Yeah.
in just a bit, because we've gone on with this topic for a decent amount of time, I do want to make sure there are other topics explored if
Okay,
you guys
yeah.
are up for it.
What's our time left on the conversation?
37 minutes in total.
Okay, remaining. Yeah. Okay. So when you construct an ought, the ought is the thing you ought to do. So the sterilizing instruments, that's the ought. So you ought to sterilize your instruments. The value by itself might not be an ought at all. It might not even be true that the doctor ought to sterilize that he ought to want to save the patient. Maybe he ought not to want to save the patient, but he wants to save the patient anyway. Just the possession of the desire, even if it's not justified, just the possession of the desire entails an ought. The ought is the sterilizing the instruments. So it's different from the value, so you can't conflate those two things. Now, if you want to ask a different question as to why ought the doctor want to save the patient, now we're moving to a different ought. We're moving one step back, and then we get to the whole point of Hume about rational ordering of values. And I talk about this again, for people who want to go further into this, if you're not following or it's confusing or whatever, if you want to know more about this, and my full demonstration is in the article in Religions that I cited in the thing. And you can find It's Moral Facts Exist in All Possible Universes. You can Google that and find it. It's free. It's not paywalled. And so you can read that and you can see how actually philosophers
you can't eat all the time with endless diatribe. So the reason here's what's going on. We're trying to untangle a concept. We're both making an ought claim. I'm making the ought claim that I think Christianity is better for society. He's saying secular humanism is. Yeah. And so what we're doing is we're untangling the philosophy behind that. Is whether or not an ought's a mere is or not, he doesn't believe that it is. And so that's the point. This is why semantics and untangling these things is so important.
Oughts derive from ises all the time, including the oughts we're discussing here.
Mere
I
ises.
even explained the desires and why people ought to have those desires.
But it's for a mere is. But here's the thing. Diving into this, I guess, kind of getting back to the idea of Christian nationalism. If it's the case that in this democracy we go ahead and vote in Christian nationalism, what's the problem with that?
So once you allow that to happen, this is exactly the thing that the founders wanted to prevent. They have all of that stuff in there to prevent exactly what you're describing. That's why they have no religious test. That's why they have the First Amendment. There's various other things that actually designed to prevent ideological capture of the government. The government has to serve evidence and reason and just maintain a civil society and not dictate what moral values people should live by.
That's not answering my question, though. I'm asking you if under this democracy we vote in Christian nationalism, what's the problem with it?
Yeah, fair point. I'm getting to that. So what would be bad? Or all the things that I described before. We're going to have...
Now, what would be bad, ultimately, under democracy, the system itself is set so that we can do this, right? If people think it's in their own best interest to vote based on their Christianity, you shouldn't have a problem with that, right?
As long as we follow the law. Yeah, the way the Constitution is written, it should prevent this. But if we ignore the Constitution, burn it down, then, yeah, you could have an ideological capture of the government.
Yeah.
But we're not supposed to have that.
Wait.
Once you allow someone to capture the government, then you immediately allow someone else to capture the government.
How would this be capturing the government? You want people to vote based on their value structures, right?
Well, as long as they're voting in the same interests of the goal of the government.
That you want, right?
That they would want, even a rationally ordered person.
Well, hang on. Entailed here is that they don't want that.
Let me finish that my explanation to that. So if you allow a government to just, people to just vote for what ideology the government can push, then it's a matter of time only that someone gets in and pushes the ideology you don't like and forces you to do things, like prevents us from having this meeting. For example, shuts this down, like maybe would happen in China, for instance. As soon as you allow that to happen, you will lose control of the government, and bad things will happen as a result. That's how we get fascism and all of that stuff.
Yeah, but do you see how you're not answering to this?
But the goal then is therefore to prevent that.
Here's what I'm asking again.
You have to structure the government so that you have the government's neutrality. It treats everyone the same, and you build it so that it cannot.
Richard, can you answer to the question? If it's the case in democracy, people vote in Christian nationalism. How can you make the claim they don't want it? And if it's the case that we're after human flourishing, if it's the case that we're after human flourishing, isn't that, what you're basing this on is we should stop them from doing that, right?
Well, so as long as they're following the Constitution that was built to prevent that, right, then that's not going to happen, right?
Well, you can vote in people to get rid of parts of the Constitution you don't like.
But changing the Constitution requires more than a majority vote. So... yeah, what would happen? Here's what would happen.
Back up.
If we got
people can vote in politicians, right, who can then do things which would change the Constitution, or there could be a constitutional convention.
You know how the Constitution? Yeah, it's a lot harder to get a constitutional amendment change. So let's assume you've got a society that's so.
And it depends on how the Supreme Court rules.
Let's assume you've got such a let's say it's 75% of the country now is Christian nationalists, and they actually get the legislatures they want. They actually in all the states and everything, and they get the Constitution changed. What my proposition would say is that's when things are going to go south. That is actually going to go against human interests because of all the past examples of this happened before.
Yeah, so you want to stop them from doing that, right?
I would want to stop them from doing that.
Would you use force and persuasion to do that?
Only if they are breaking the law. If they
but they change the law to their preference.
Yeah, I think in that case, if that happened, if the country actually voted to destroy itself, I would have to leave.
Okay, so I just want to make sure though. Would you use force rather than persuasion in that case to stop that from happening?
Only if they use force against me. If they're using force, then I'll use force. But if we had the whole country literally just decided this, to basically just
Well, it's not the whole country.
destroy the country.
That's
like
not how
burn
it
the country
works.
down.
That's
I
not
would,
how it works.
I would actually have to leave. And if they tried chasing me and finding me,
Well, they're not trying to chase you and find you.
Yeah.
The spirit of the question is asking
right.
you. I'm asking you a simple question.
Force is met with force.
Yeah, I'm not asking you about force being met with force. I'm asking you if force should be used to prevent this if necessary. So, like, let's say, for instance, I don't know, 60% of the nation wanted it, and the rest of them didn't. Should they, at that point, be using force rather than persuasion?
So if they did it, like they actually did it, then I would just have to leave. Because if they're not
You're
using
not answering
force,
the question, dude.
unless they start using force against me, like if they come for me to like kill all the atheists, well, now I have to fight them.
I'm asking you if it's the case that force should be used by people who are in a minority, if the majority is voting in these policies, yes or no?
I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
Should people, if necessary, use force, even if it's the case that these are being voted in legitimately, right? Is there some problem with people using force at that point to stop it?
Well, I think at that point, it is the wrong word here. So, like, what then happens? So once they turn around, once they've done it, and they turn around and start using force on us.
Well,
like,
what force?
To go kill all the atheists? Or
No, they're
whatever
not.
they decide to do.
No. They could just do things like,
But
I
you
don't
know
know,
that.
no
You
more
don't
gay
know.
marriage.
By the time, look at the French Revolution. By the time they get in there, you won't have control of what they decide at that point.
But
they
you
could
can't
decide to go kill all
But
the
what I'm
atheists.
saying is that is it the case that you would, if you had X amount of like people in a minority who they felt that they were being oppressed, they just weren't being oppressed with violence necessarily, unless it was a case they were then breaking laws.
At some
new
point,
laws.
it has to be violence. There has to be violence, right? And so if you're
then that would be the case with anything. If you just
'cause
violate any law, there's violence.
If you take away all the rights, but then never enforce that,
Yeah.
then you're basically just respecting rights.
I totally
so
agree.
if you take away all the rights and then enforce that, you're using violence to take away people's
Yeah, but I mean,
rights.
this could be phrased however you want. There's a right for men and women to get married. That's it.
A right?
Yeah, you just say there's a right for men and women to get married. Now we're enforcing that right, right?
Yeah,
and then homosexuals get married. They say, oh, well, and you're not allowed to do that. You're violating the law.
Well, so I'm pretty sure, if you want to follow the logic on that, I agree with the conservative Supreme Court decision written by Neil Gorsuch and concurred by Roberts on why actually that it follows out of the Civil Rights Act, that it would be against that. So you would have to overthrow the Civil Rights Act. Okay.
Or
so
just have it
suppose you do-
reinterpreted or amended.
Yeah.
You could
right.
have things
Yeah,
amended,
right, correct.
things
Yeah,
like
you
this.
could
Well, what I'm saying is
amend
that
it,
these are
whatever.
all, if
Yeah.
this was done in a lawful way,
Mhm.
right, to get these things done.
Which it was, right? So
Yeah, and if it's done in a lawful way to get them undone, right,
Yeah.
is that now fascism?
What do you, yeah, no. So
Yes or no?
fascism
Yeah or
comes-
no?
So if it's done in that way,
Yeah.
the process is not fascist. The end result might be if they start coming after you with billy clubs to like arrest gay people, for example.
Well, they're not going to arrest them, but what if they just don't let them get married?
if they just
what
don't
if
let them
they?
get- no, yeah,
hang on, Richard. Let me ask the question.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say, for instance, they go through, they outlaw OnlyFans, prostitution, things like this. Make that law. They outlaw homosexual marriage. Make that law. Right? They outlaw things like transgender kids getting reassignment surgery, and they make that a law.
Sure.
All right? People violate those laws. They then get arrested or things like this, like you would for any other law.
Mm-hmm.
Is that now, are we in fascist territory?
No, because at that point, the people are actually having a say, and they're just using the lawful, nonviolent process to decide what rights they're going to have.
Perfect.
Now, we would engage in persuasion, right? And so I would think that that's going to be bad. It's going to lead to bad outcomes.
Now then, tell
But
me
we can
any
talk about
of the current
actual basis.
This
of
is perfect.
Evidence. So this is why secular.
Now we're
humanism
getting
is
there.
about
So,
evidence.
so help me out here. What Christian nationalist proposition then fits this form of fascism? Use of force rather than persuasion, democracy.
Yeah.
Which one? Which actual proposition being proposed by Christian nationalists right now?
It sounds like
fits that.
you're defining Christian nationalism as simply taking away the rights of gay people to marry.
No.
I'm
I'm asking you a specific question. I'm going to ask it again. What proposition from anybody who's advocating Christian nationalism would not fall under the idea that they're changing the laws to better suit themselves, including amending several constitutional amendments or things like this? How would that be fascism? By your definition, that's not fascism now.
Right.
So if that's the case,
It only becomes fascism when violence comes up.
yeah, right, exactly. So Christian nationalism is not, in fact, unless you can give me the propositions of Christian nationalism that are going to lead to this sort of violence rather than just law changing, can you?
So are you claiming that Christian nationalism won't increase.
I didn't claim anything. I asked you a question. Can you steel man what or at least
to understand your
repeat back?
question, I got to understand what you're getting at. So I need to
you know, you
understand.
don't. You don't need to understand what I'm getting at to understand my question. You just need
'cause
to answer the
I
question.
don't know what you're asking for.
Well, let me
So-
ask you again.
Yeah.
Christians right now, Christian nationalist thought leaders all over the place who are saying we want to amend these various laws under the democratic rules, use the Constitution in order to amend many of these laws, right? And then if you violate
and you have
those
the
laws...
protected right to do that, to talk about it.
Yeah.
and
So hang
persuade.
on. So hang
we
on.
have the protected right to persuade people to
I
not
understand,
vote
but
that
what I'm
way?
saying
Yeah.
to you is how could that be fascism if there's no use of force being involved here?
So
If the Christian, can you show me the Christian nationalist proposition that leads to force?
if you're talking about the Christian nationalist government is not going to use force to enforce any laws or do anything.
Your secular government will.
Yes, but those are evidence-based, human-centered things. They're not based on ideology. that
That's
is
not what you
contrary to
said.
evidence.
You said fascism is use of force rather than persuasion democracy. It doesn't matter if they're using
Yeah.
evidence or not. Hang on.
Persuasion and democracy, yeah.
They're utilizing persuasion and democracy.
That's right.
And they're still utilizing persuasion and democracy.
Yes.
So they're not fascist, right?
Well, they're not advocating. I mean, they might be advocating for a fascist government, but they're not fascist yet because
No.
they
That's not what I'm
resorted
asking.
to violence.
This is wild to me. So help me out here again. If it's the case that democratically, for instance, we just say no more trans, right? You're just not allowed to be trans anymore, right? Or I don't know, you're not allowed to get married as a homosexual anymore, and you're not allowed to do prostitution anymore. Let's just say that you're like not allowed to gamble or do drugs anymore ever, right? You're not allowed to do any of those things.
Yep.
That's passed democratically through persuasion.
Yeah.
Now it has the force of law.
That's right.
That's no longer fascism.
That by itself is not fascism.
Then can you give me
If
any
you can
Christian
also-
propositions?
If you
Christian
can persuade people
Yeah.
to vote again to take those things away and
Perfect.
change them, yes.
Then show me the Christian nationalists out there who are giving the proposition which would lead to this fascism you're talking about, because that's all they're talking about doing.
Yeah, so I don't know exactly what you have in mind as Christian nationalism, like what the Christian nationalist government
That's
would
not my
do.
question. My question is, can you name a single Christian nationalist right now who is proposing anything other than just amending laws and tailoring them to their own preferences?
Wait, so like, let me see if I understand what you're asking. So you're asking if, so like, for example, the kill the gays people, for instance.
When there's no
there
Christian
were-
nationalists seriously proposing
there
to
were-
kill homosexuals. None.
Yes, absolutely.
Who?
So there was a guy who ran in Texas, had got like 100,000 votes on the kill the gays biblical policy concept. So
Come on.
that's a
This
real
is not
thing.
serious. There's
And then
no serious
the ones
political
who couldn't get
movement for
elected
this.
here went to Uganda and got it done there, and actually got Uganda to actually start trying to kill the gays. And then of course
I don't
that
think
got changed
Uganda
over
needed
time.
much help with that, right? But the thing is like pointing this out again when we're talking about the proposition here. I can't actually think of a serious Republican, a serious person in office, or a serious Christian nationalist who has any sort of following which could actually have anything get done like this, who's proposing anything other than amending laws, having them enforced to suit their preferences, just like you. Hang on, just like you are. You can't call that fascism then, by your own definition.
So it depends on like what. So that's why I'm just not even clear on what you think that Christian nationalists are going to do when they take over. So like,
I'm asking you which Christian nationalist has a serious proposition for utilizing force other than democracy and persuasion, which is what you're considering fascism to be. You said all of them are fascist right in your opening statement. Can you give me the proposals that they're
you're talking about
making?
the opening statement. Yeah. So the Christian nationalist idea of destroying the Constitution, right? Of actually taking away these checks and balances that actually, for instance, taking away democracy, for instance, taking away the women's right to vote, for instance. So these things.
Wait. If you take away women's rights to vote via persuasion and democracy, that's not fascism.
No, by the time you get to that, right, by the time you're actually taking away a right that is necessary for a well-functioning government, now you're actually involved
It's
in
not
fascism.
necessary for a well-functioning
'Cause you're-
government.
You're limiting the power. You're actually putting the power in men. So now men control the government. So yeah, that would actually start to be trending.
Wait,
towards a
hang
fascist
on.
government.
Well, okay, so I mean, then 18-year-olds control the government, and 17-year-olds don't. They're disenfranchised.
So if now you're talking about why do we enfranchise
No, I'm
people
pointing
at a
out.
certain
I'm
age.
pointing out something important here.
Yeah,
This is
you're
still
changing the subject,
No,
but-
I'm going to stay on the subject. Use of force
So-
rather than persuasion, democracy. I still haven't heard a single Christian nationalist thought leader that you can name who has any sort of serious following any sort of political following, has any sort of moxie that
100,000
can get
votes
this
sounds
done.
like a big following, but yeah. So I think like this is a thing that people can test and go see like what actually are Christian nationalists.
Yeah, who
arguing
though?
for.
Can you name a name? Can you give me the name?
No, I don't.
Because there isn't any, Richard. There's none who aren't using.
Yeah, that's
and by the
checkable.
way, so Richard, here's Richard's entire argument reduced. This is wild. And you can, if I'm straw manning this, I would like you actually to correct
Okay,
it.
yeah,
But isn't it the case that what you're saying here is, as long as Christian nationalists utilize persuasion and democracy to change any amendments we don't like, any laws we don't like, and we utilize only persuasion and democracy to do that, and then enforce those laws tailored to our preferences, that is not indeed fascism at all, is it?
There's two possible outcomes. So one is that it's not. The other is that if they start actually using violence to suppress the vote, for instance, if they actually start contradicting the humanist necessary rights-based democracy, if they get rid of the democracy and the persuasion part, now they're fascists.
Well,
right?
they can
So
limit democracy.
Once you've got billy clubs beating people
Wait
up
a
who are
second,
saying
wait.
things you don't like.
Yeah, I know,
or-
but nobody's proposing that. No Christian nationalist.
I-
You can't
okay.
name one. Name one.
So
Can you just name one? Just
what
one.
What will you do if I have YouTubers out there find a bunch of names that fit that? Like, what behavior would you engage in?
I would engage with those same YouTubers, and I would say, look, let's go through it. Are these people actually proposing that we're using force? These serious, like guys who can actually get this done, they're seriously proposing that we're using force in order to do anything other than enforce laws that the majority of people want because they're voting them in.
Getting rid of democracy itself then would not be an example of that. That would actually be instituting a fascist government. So it
you're not
depends-
getting rid of democracy by limiting it.
No,
All you're doing is putting bumpers on it, like you want.
No. Like if you take away the votes of half the people, you're actually working.
That's
towards
not
destruction of
destroying democracy. That's just
Yeah, it
that's
is.
flat out illogical. Okay, well then
You're-
why can't 15-year-olds vote?
So that gets to the competence argument, right? So there are people who are adults, let's say 40-year-olds, who can be declared legally under due process of
Sure.
law to be incompetent, and
Yeah.
so then they don't get the vote.
Okay, so help me out here. Why is it then that if we raised, let's just say hypothetically, we raised the voting age to 35, is that fascism?
Yeah, I would say so. It's because you're disenfranchising. You're disenfranchising competent people who are actually part of the society and therefore have an equal. Should have an equal
Do you
say.
think 17-year-olds are a lot less competent than 18-year-olds?
So that varies case by case. So if
Yeah,
you
so
wanna get into, like,
exactly.
the-
It varies case by case.
If we wanted to have a better system, we could have competency tests, and so decide the age rather not by age, but by whether you pass the competency test. And then some people over 18 would not qualify as competent, and some people under 18 would qualify as competent.
What about prisoners?
That would be the most rational system. But
Should
it's
prisoners
expensive and difficult to
be
implement.
able to vote?
Say again?
Should prisoners be able to vote?
Not when they're in prison because they've actually gone through
So
due
you
process.
want, but wait,
Due
so,
process. See,
so,
they didn't have the right taken away.
so that's not
arbitrarily.
fascism, right?
It was due process.
so
That's
you
right.
can limit you can limit prisoners being able to vote.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's not fascism.
Yeah, 'cause
but you
that's a-
can't limit any other voting block.
That's a punishment for a
Yeah.
crime. So that's through due
Yeah.
process, not arbitrarily.
Yeah, but it's still democracy. Let's say that you had like only people who could own property could vote. That would still be a democracy.
Yeah, true.
So the thing is like what you're saying here makes no sense. I just asked you if you limit the electorate, does that get rid of democracy? You say,
Yeah.
or is that fascism? You said yes. The thing is, though, is that it still holds that it's using persuasion and democracy. It's still a democracy.
Yeah, in the sort of you're using the word differently than I was. So
No, I don't think I am.
When I'm talking about rights-based democracy, I am actually talking about all competent people should have an equal say in the government, so they should be enfranchised. If you're disenfranchising people, you're heading towards fascism because now you're imposing force.
That
on
doesn't
people
mean it's
who
fascist.
don't have a participation in the government.
You see how what you're doing is equivocating here. You're using the ambiguity of the language in order to switch between two different definitions.
No.
When you said democracy here, does democracy require full participation? No. Does it require in any way, shape, or form everybody can vote? No. Can we have certain people who they have stakeholder democracy, for instance? You can vote if you meet such and such criteria.
Yeah.
You can vote
Yeah,
if you
you
can
can
pass
have
a
all of
civics
these.
test.
Yeah, that's
You can
true.
vote if you do this. You can vote. That still fits the criteria of democracy, doesn't it?
That is not what I meant by democracy. You're defining democracy as broadly as possible, and which is fair. That's an actual use of the word. in my actual explanation, in my opening, I made very clear that I'm talking about democracy that enfranchises and not a democracy that limits to an oligarchy, for example. So you got to have rights. To have rights-based democracy, an evidence-based rights-based democracy, all competent people should have an equal say. They should not have it lorded over them by everybody else.
Yeah, but you haven't demonstrated.
Yeah,
but you haven't demonstrated how that would be fascist if you limit the electorate to like super competent people or people who are very interested in voting rather than the most bribable portions of it, or if you just have stakeholder democracy. Yeah. Is stakeholder democracy fascist?
So I'm assuming, so like the thing is that stakeholders are everybody. Everybody's a stakeholder.
Well, no, not everybody owns property, for instance.
Any narrower stakeholder is you're actually imposing force on people that don't have a say in the government. So that becomes fascist, yeah.
Is it, so it's inherently fascist? Fascist?
It becomes fascist.
Yeah, but you see how you're using ambiguity again. You're switching between two different things. Yeah, look.
No.
If you say the use of force rather than persuasion in democracy, that's what fascism is. If people utilize democracy to limit democracy, it's still democracy.
Yeah, a fascist democracy.
That's not fascism.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So
it's a fascist democracy?
See, that's the distinction that I was making. If you're having an oligarchy, which is technically a democracy, that's not the democracy I was talking about, the one that we actually need. And so the instrumentation of that is that once a society is using force to impose on other people who don't have a say in the government, now you've got fascism operating. That's
so parents are fascist?
Say again?
Are parents fascist?
Well, incompetent people aren't relevant to this point. So you keep trying to say.
Wait a second.
Incompetent people are not different.
I think 17-year-olds are as competent as 18-year-olds for the most part.
And if you want to persuade to actually expand the franchise to 17-year-olds,
well, but why don't I limit it to 21? Like drinking, you're not old enough to have a beer?
There's no sound basis for that. Actually, the drinking age shouldn't even be 21.
What should it be?
It should be 18.
It should be. What's the sound basis for 18 versus 17?
As soon as you're a competent person, you should have all your rights.
What is the difference in
everybody else? And you should have.
Then, Richard, you're in. I don't understand this either. So then, what?
So
how do we determine, other than arbitrarily, it should be 18?
Do you even want a society where everyone has equal rights and has an equal vote who is competent? Do you want to actually take the rights of voting?
When you're talking about voting, I would raise the voting age. Yeah,
you would raise the voting age. Yeah, so that would be contrary to evidence. That'd be contrary to evidence in terms of who's actually competent.
Oh, really? When does the brain fully develop?
Well, that's not relevant to competence. Competence has to.
It's not relevant to competence.
No, okay. No, not at all. Because
I didn't know that.
Yeah, no. Your brain develops continually throughout life. So
yeah, but I mean, it develops.
Being more developed doesn't make you more competent. Competence is actually meeting a threshold of the ability to understand rational decisions. So
and do we test for that?
Medical ethics boards, when they determine competency, they run a competency test to determine that.
Yeah, there's a test. Is there a test for you to be enfranchised?
I would approve of one.
Yeah, I know, but the thing is that then how can you say it's competency? You can't say that these people are competent. You don't even test them.
Well,
nothing. And the thing is back to this, it also doesn't help your argument at all. How?
If someone's not competent, they can get declared incompetent. You can force the issue and have the competency test done.
Yeah, but that's different than competency in voting. Do you agree with me that there's a bunch of really, really, really uninformed voters who go out and vote anyway?
That's not the kind of competency I'm talking about. Competency when you do a medical ethics test for competency, you're not testing whether they are a scientist or have medical knowledge or whatever. You're testing whether they have the ability to understand and make decisions rationally. So that does mean that they can make stupid decisions and still be competent.
Why wouldn't you put that for like voting then? Why is that a problem to do?
Because this is the thing. There's a lot of political science on this. If you actually do that, then two things happen that lead to bad results. One is people start gaming who gets to pass the test and who not, and so you've got an oligarchy again. The other thing that happens is that you can't have a society of the governed if you're excluding people who actually are competent. If you make up an idea of competence that doesn't really relate to the competency that we're trying to talk about now.
Yeah, but you also have
can you make rational decisions?
But you have other issues with universal.
If you have the ability to make rational decisions about your life, then you actually are competent enough to be a
but you
society.
have bad issues here too with universal suffrage. You end up with incompetent voters who can be bribed. because on the short term they get things that they want.
That's not the competency that we're talking about.
It is the competency that we're talking about.
Now you're obfuscating by using two different concepts of competency.
I mean, okay, first of all, I didn't even define what I meant by. I'm trying to use what you mean by it.
No, I'm watching you do it.
And so
now.
the second portion here that we're looking at is, again, your claim here is that suffrage has to be universal or it's fascism. When your opening statement, when I asked you to define this, and I remember I made sure I got you to do it 3 different times so that I was clear, use of force rather than persuasion and democracy. You're now saying that the democracy that you're talking about is a requirement of full enfranchisement. Full enfranchisement.
Well, I mean, apart from the exceptions we just talked about, right?
Yeah, right. So the thing is that anything outside of that is fascist? Is a fascist society?
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, it depends on how it implements that. So fascism comes through implementation, right? So yeah, I would say there's definitely degrees of fascism there.
But it's not a fascist society.
It might be. It might be slightly fascist. It might be heading towards a fascist state. It could be half fascist. Yeah, there's degrees of fascism.
It's 10% fascist?
10% what?
But pointing this out, when you say use of force rather than persuasion, democracy, and that's what fascist is, you still haven't actually told me how it is any of these Christian nationalists or any Christian nationalist propositions or any person making these propositions is doing anything other than saying that through persuasion and democracy, we can change and tailor society to fit our preferences. And we can use the very constitutional precepts to do that. If it's the case that we did not have the 14th Amendment, hang on. I just want to make sure that I got this right.
Go for it.
Our founding fathers were fascists, right?
Yeah, I just realized something.
Yeah.
We've been talking for almost an hour about the definition of fascism, which is not even what we're supposed to be debating.
Well, hang on. It shows an incoherent or coherent worldview.
It doesn't even depend on the definition. We could just erase fascism from my opening statement. It had no effect on anything I argued. What I argued was that a secular humanist society creates better outcomes for everybody. I presented a bunch of evidence for that fact, scientific evidence, comparative evidence, historical evidence. So what we call fascism is irrelevant to what is actually better.
Well,
so my argument is secular humanism is a better society. It actually works better. We have tons of examples of this. More secular societies are better in every metric that we can look at.
Yeah, but do you see
Christian societies?
Do you see the smuggle?
Is not a good idea to recommend for.
But do you see the
government.
smuggle here for better?
Say again?
You see the smuggle here is for better. You immediately smuggle in under better.
But I defined operation.
I know. You
means.
defined things that you like. I get it. But the thing is that's the smuggle of better. Hang on.
Well, everybody likes emotional and physical prosperity. Everyone likes that.
Well, the thing is like under, well, I don't know.
Peace and justice.
Muslims don't seem to. but the thing is.
And you would argue they're irrational in that
so
regard, right?
Okay, but the point is, let's start with this. I just want to make sure that I got this right. Under this definition and everything that you just said, our founding fathers were fascist.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Our founders were fascist.
Yeah, they were at least slightly fascist. They actually.
Well, I mean, they were really fascist because they almost let nobody vote.
They legalized slavery. Yeah.
They let nobody vote, basically.
I mean, yeah, there's a restricted vote.
Now, under our founders' version of what voting was, and I just want to be very, very clear on this, under what their version of voting was, if there was no slavery, none of that, they still would have been fascist, right?
Yeah. Why are we still talking about the definition
Here's
of fascism?
why. Because
this is irrelevant.
Because I want to make sure that we have coherency when we get to prescriptions. That's why. So I just want this answered, and then I'll tell you what.
No,
if you let me finish this off, you can interrogate me.
I could have saved the whole hour here to say, like, I'll agree with any definition of fascism you want, but now let's talk about what we're supposed to be debating. We haven't even talked once about what we're supposed to be debating for this whole hour.
We have been.
We've been arguing over the definition of fascism, which is a useless point.
No, we're arguing over societal prescriptions from your view and my view.
Irrational.
It's not irrational.
Yes.
So not only that,
let's get hung up for an hour.
Well, let's get into it then. Let's get in. I'll tell you what. Let's get into whatever you want.
What we're supposed to be debating is irrational.
I'll tell you what. Get
irrational the whole time.
Get into whatever you want then. Ask me whatever you want.
Well, actually, I'm content with you to ask me questions.
Great.
But I want you to ask me questions. I want you to ask me questions about what we're actually supposed to be debating.
I'm trying. Listen, the reason...
No, you're arguing over semantics. I will even grant, for the purposes of this debate, I will grant your definition of fascism.
Okay, then we'll move right into the next thing. Let's talk about better.
We're talking about better.
We're talking about better. So what is better other than your sense of preference and other people's senses of preference? What is it?
What is better is what's better for everyone
Yeah, hang on. That's a tautology.
Yeah. So that's the thing. So like what is necessary for everyone to achieve the things that everyone wants, right? So every rational person knows that they need peace and justice to achieve all the other things they want to achieve. They know they want, if they can access it, increased emotional and material prosperity. Everybody really wants these things. Even if they don't know it, you can talk to them and get them to rationally understand that. Those are the things that they want. So that is why it derives from what everybody wants. Everybody wants those things. And everybody needs those things in order to accomplish anything else they want. So that follows necessarily from that status. And so once you get that, now you have the goal, and from that goal and the physical facts of how things work, physical systems work, how social systems work, and so on, then you get the ought, right? So you have the desire. Everybody agrees on what the goal is.
So can I just ask, is better here, does better here then just mean what people want?
It means a specific thing that people want, not just whatever they want.
Okay.
Right?
Well, wait, hang on.
So we've empirically determined that everyone wants these things: peace, justice, prosperity. Everyone wants those things. So that's an empirical fact. That's a fact. That's not a supposition or anything like that. Once you accept that fact, there are then certain things about what best achieves that and what doesn't best achieve that. And
but do you see?
Are then prescribed.
Yeah, but do you see the
entailed
next?
by
Do you see the next smuggle when you say things like justice? What is justice?
So that's not a smuggle. What people want. That's
Yeah,
I'm
but
talking
when
about
you
what
say people want justice,
So now you want to waste another hour.
I'm not
arguing over
trying
the
to.
definition of
I'm
justice?
trying. I'm literally trying. Everybody wants this thing. Okay, what's the thing? Stop wasting my time.
Yeah, I think that's silly because I think people.
I don't think it's silly. I think that
people understand justice is
what?
Is the equitable enforcement of the laws.
That's all justice is? Because you can have unjust laws, right?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Now you're changing terms in terms of what kind
I'm just making sure I got your terms.
Yeah. What people want is to be treated equitably. So if everyone is being treated equal, then that's justice. And so to actually maintain that, and also to the enforcement of rights, right? So like the right to assemble, the right to free speech, and so on. If people are not allowed to have those things, then you're facing it's unjust because you're distributing rights and properties, rights differently to different people. So justice is equitable treatment. So people want basically fair. They want things to be fair.
They want them to be fair. So if it's the case,
well, and they need them to be, right? Mm-hmm. So like there's an actual particular fairness here that even if someone isn't aware of what would be fair.
So this is a massive appeal
to... They still need a fairly adjudicated society to achieve all the other things that they want.
So this is a massive appeal to consensus?
It is an appeal to what people absolutely need to achieve all of their desires. So that's a fact of the social system.
Yeah, well...
Any social
hang
system.
On,
that's why
Wait,
I cited
what?
Axelrod. That's why I cited Axelrod's studies on cooperation, because he proved that there's literally no social system in any possible world that doesn't need this property to be maintained for everybody to achieve all their other goals, and not for there to be failure modes where you get excess conflict.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily what people want. And so this is the problem, right? When you say it's specific, it's specific things that people want. Hang on. And then you say something like justice. That's a very loaded term, justice. It means a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
That's
to Islam, justice means something way different than it means to us. To Christians, justice means something very different than it does to secularists.
That's why I constructed my argument
Richard,
in the opening.
Let me respond real quick.
Okay, but
then I'll let
you're skipping right past what I
And the thing
argued.
is that you just defined it as equitable treatment, and this is desirable by all people, but it's not. Equity itself is not the desire of all people for justice.
Let's go back to what my actual opening statement was, right? So what I actually argued. Mm-hmm. So I argued that I said the word need. So I argued that people need this justice to achieve all the other things that they want.
That's
things
worse.
go worse for them if they don't have justice. So people can have a mistaken understanding of what justice is. People can want things that are self-harming, that's going to do bad for them. My discussion was need. So whether you believe it or agree with it or understand it yet, you need certain things to be the case. You need peace. You might think it's great. Why don't we just fight a war everywhere constantly and just be constantly at war? You might want that. You might think that, but you would be wrong in terms of what would help you accomplish the things you want. You need peace, actually, whether you're aware of that or not. So peace is essential.
That's
you
another
need
smuggle.
Peace. It's not a question.
No, that's tautological again.
This is a physical social system thing. So if you don't have peace,
Richard,
people's ability to achieve
how
their
is it
goals
not a
gets impaired.
tautology to say we need it because we need it?
No, so if you want to accomplish your goals, that ability, whatever
You
your
can
goals
accomplish
are,
your goals without peace.
It's impaired, right? So you obviously...
Yeah, but see what I mean?
So-
It's like that's not a need.
No, it's... yes, it is.
No, it's
So
not.
If you want to maximize your ability to do this,
Yes.
right? So you don't want to throw impairments on yourself to make it harder to achieve your goals. Just because you could achieve goals, maybe it's much harder.
Mm-hmm.
You absolutely do want to have it not be harder,
Yeah.
right? So everybody, that's a need. People need
Yeah.
it to be easier, right? So people need.
Well, I
these
don't
to
think
have
that
the
you
things they
demonstrated
want.
the need, but I'm just willing to grant it, just to move the conversation forward. Which Christians,
Granting what?
the idea that that there's a need for peace in order to accomplish goals. Which Christian nationalists are proposing war?
Proposing war?
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of Christian nationalists.
Which ones?
Okay, I can't name anyone.
Yeah,
right now,
because
but
there
I'm
aren't
sure-
any. There's not a single one.
I'm pretty sure, don't a lot of Christian nationalists support the war in Israel? Or are they against it? What's your take on that?
They're usually pretty anti-Zionist.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah, they're usually
But
pretty
they're also pretty anti-Muslim. So
Yeah,
do they think Israel
I think that
should
they
get
usually,
out of Gaza?
Well, the thing that's funny is
Are you pro-Palestinian?
The
Is that
Christian,
the
the Christian nationalist position, generally speaking, when it comes to war, especially like war between Palestine and Israel, is frankly not our business, right? So we would be promoting the peace and welfare of our people and our people group, which would be
Yeah.
United States citizens. So the thing is
until you get into power, and then the same thing happens that happened every other time we get Christian governments in power, is we get an increase in war.
That's every.
So you might think that that's what's going to happen, but as soon as you give the hands over to
democracy
you're
has
gonna
not
see
prevented
a lot more
that.
warmongering.
Democracy has not prevented war.
History has shown that. Democracy has reduced war.
Oh, well, I don't
In fact,
know. Has it?
Yes, it has.
Well, let's talk about.
Statistically.
Yeah, let's just talk
I
about the
cited
20th.
studies. Actually, I cited books and summaries in my opening.
Let's just
So
hang on.
even
Richard,
enfranchisement-
hang
the
on. Let me finish real
enfranchisement of
quick.
women, the enfranchisement of women reduced interstate conflict, and you can show where it was, like where women's
But
suffrage
no
started.
Christian nationalist is proposing war.
It doesn't matter what they're proposing. What matters
It does
is
matter what they're proposing.
No, it does. It doesn't, because when we look at historical past, what has happened, they can say whatever the hell they want to say. They're not necessarily telling the truth. They're not necessarily correctly.
You can say that about any system of governance.
Correct. So the point is,
So who cares?
so we look at the evidence. So the evidence is historically Christianity running governments does not work out well. You get more war. So regardless of what Christians say or want, Jesus said turn the other cheek, so he's totally anti-war. And yet what happens as soon as Christians get control of government? Wars constantly. In fact, when the founding fathers created the document, they were on this, and I mentioned this, they were on the end of hundreds of years of Christian warmongering. So it doesn't matter what Christians say. What matters is what they do.
Yeah.
And history gives us the evidence of what they do.
Well, here's the thing. The idea here is just this. I need a proposition from you which fits this criteria that Christians aren't actually, if they're in charge, going to give you the same things. Meaning, when you say, hang on.
That's a different thing.
Hang on. When you say that it's persuasion democracy or it's leading towards fascism, you make these claims that, wait a second, when Christians are in charge, it leads to more war. I'm even willing to grant...
I didn't say that. I actually didn't say that. I didn't say when Christians are in charge, it would lead to more war. What I meant is when you
Ooh, well, that sounds like a performative contradiction.
No,
but
because
okay.
if you take the founding fathers, they were mostly Christian.
That's right.
And so, but they understood that the government could not be Christian.
So Christians in charge.
So, yeah, but they made the government not operate as a Christian government, right? So it was equal to everybody. It treated everybody the same. It did not impose any Christian things.
So,
right? So
Christians are in charge of the government.
Christians can
That's fine.
certainly vote for secular humanist governments
So
and prefer to, even argue that they should.
So if it's the case that Christians are in charge of the entire government because they're voted into office, and it's the case that they begin to amend it, let's just say, for instance, not only does that not meet any of your criteria for fascism, doesn't meet any of your criteria for basically for anything bad. Why shouldn't people go and vote Christians into office as much as possible, even if the preference and tailoring of people is going to be to remove these things that you consider enshrined rights?
That was my argument. That in fact, so we can separate Christians into two groups. The ones that agree that we should have a secular humanist government, right?
Yeah.
So they're actually agreeing with me on this.
Sure.
So they're not a threat to this. The Christians who want to dismantle that, they're a threat to this. So if they use legal process to get there, then what ends up, like at that point, would be a fascist state, right? So it's like they're promoting, like actually moving towards fascism, even if they don't think they are or whatever. But again, I think we're arguing over the definition of fascism.
Well, because the problem,
let's take fascism out
I don't
of it.
think we're really arguing over the definition.
Let's say fascism doesn't exist. The word doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Nothing is fascist. Let's just say that.
Yeah, nothing's fascist.
So the issue is
outcomes.
Outcomes,
yeah.
exactly.
So let's start with births. For outcomes, how are you going to solve the birth rate problem? You're just going to do mass migration, right?
Well, right now, yeah, immigration is working fine at that in every country. It is actually.
So hang on.
If you look at Canada, Sweden, even.
And are we getting all of those people from Christian nations who have an ought to breed?
Say again?
Are we getting those people mostly from Christian nations where they have a higher population of people because they're Christians and they have an ought to breed?
Well, the reality is that once you get into a free democratic society, it's very expensive. So children become expensive. So we see this, the third generation rule. You bring in immigrants, by the third generation, they're having children at the same rate as everybody else.
Rate.
Because it's too expensive to have
I agree.
kids. Yeah.
So your whole plan is to use the third world or third world nations or places like this as basically a breeding tube for your society, right?
Well, I mean, that's kind of a callous way to put.
But it's true,
describe
isn't
human
it?
beans.
Like, I mean,
human beings aren't breeding tubes. They're actual people.
How are you not doing that though? Isn't the plan for you to use the third world in order to import as many people because they breed and we don't?
That's right. And what part of our plan should be to uplift the third world as well. So that will also bring down that. So
we have a 2-minute warning.
All of this wraps up around 2080. Projections are that the population of the Earth will start to decline by 2080. We're not there yet. So when that does happen, there's two things we could do.
It could happen long before that, by the way.
Not according to the math so far. The stats show it's about like 2070, 2080.
Yeah, the problem is that the UN has been consistently wrong on their estimates.
I'm not sure if that's UN stats, but
I think it is. I think you're referencing United Nations stats or whoever you're.
I don't think it's just stats, right? It's an actual scientific study with math and everything, right? So like if you're going to say that it's wrong, you've got to actually prove that it's wrong and find like where is their math wrong.
Well, I'm not. Hang on. I'm not quibbling over whether that's right or wrong. I'm just saying I think that it's even possible that it could happen before then.
Yeah. I mean, logically possible. It's not likely though.
But hang on. Whether it is or not,
the birth rates are too high right now.
Why is it that we should not? How does it not lead to a better society when it's the case that we can have people who have shared value structures, shared value systems, right, and are at least somewhat like-minded because they have intergenerational patriotism? My father's father's father died here. Yeah. My parents tilled this land. My parents came from this area. That leads to direct patriotism, things like this. Yeah. Why is it a better plan to use the third world as a breeding tube?
The same thing happens by the third generation. Third generation rule, they're just as patriotic and just as invested. So, and that's always been the case. Like it's been the case when we had the Irish. It's been the case when we brought in the Chinese. So, like we have Chinese Americans that are, families been here over 100 years. So, this is.
Is that what's going on in the UK?
Well, I'm not going to discuss what's specifically going on in the UK.
I mean, is it? I mean, I'm just asking. Like, by the third generation, do you think that the Muslims are just going to be waving flags like they are in Dearborn? They're just like, "Yay, America!"
Probably. Well, I don't know about that, but probably statistically, yeah, that's what the science shows.
Yeah, probably not. I mean, the thing is
third that generation.
All that you're doing is it sounds like you're just outsourcing. You're saying, "Hey, look, we do need births to go up."
That's just human resources.
But why is it that when we're talking about human resources, right? The thing that makes all these third worlders have all these children, right? Don't they have an ought from their religion to do that? So don't you kind of need the Christians to keep breeding people for you?
I'll give you a chance to respond, and then we do.
Yeah, go ahead.
So now you're distinguishing between do they believe they have an ought?
Yeah.
Or is that ought true or false? So
do they believe if they have the ought to do it?
Yeah, they believe that.
And so they are doing it. Because they believe that they have an ought to do it, and you
are
utilizing. Hang on, I just want to point this out.
Same status.
Hang on, Richard. Let me finish my point, and I'll let you get into it. I promise.
Let's talk about.
Let me finish my point first. Okay. The case of the matter is that you just admitted that Christians have an ought to have children. Because they have that ought to have children, you're going to use them as a breeding factory for your nation. What's really funny?
Not just Christians.
What's really funny about this, though? Why shouldn't we have the same programs, same money spent, same things like this on our own domestic policy, so that we can get our own domestic birth rate back up? Are people groups not worth preserving at all?
Here's a point where we might agree on something.
Okay.
So.
We'll end with this point.
When we get to the point where we're globally the population is declining, right? So that we don't have any alternative. Mm-hmm. So we have two options at that point. One is to start retooling society to survive the decline of population, which is entirely doable, especially with robotics, et cetera. or we can actually start investing money in actually paying people to become parents. So if you actually want American women to have more kids and get married and so on, I think the government should pay them to do that. And then you would
already do.
You would have to persuade us to do that.
Well, hang on. But Richard,
we do have to go in the Q&A so people can. I think there are a number of people that want to ask questions. But this has been a fantastic discussion, gentlemen. We really do appreciate it. Stellar debate. We're going to jump into it very quickly. Come on up, Duff. Thank you.
Dr. Carrier, you said human well-being above all else. Considering you're pro-choice and abortion completely disregards the well-being of that human being, isn't it correct to say you don't value human well-being above all else?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm sorry. That's a good question because it didn't come up in the debate or anything like that. So the thing is human well-being, there has to actually be a person, right? So this, and it's evidence-based reasoning. So here's where I probably agree with you. I actually agree with the original Roe v. Wade decision, which said third trimester abortion does have a right to child issues. So that a defense of the mother is the only way that you should have third trimester abortions. That's Roe v. Wade. That's actually the ruling that was there. I agree with that because it's ambiguous at that stage whether there's a person there or not because of the development of their brain. Before the third trimester, there's no physically possible way that there's a person in there. So it's pre-person. It's basically a half-built house rather than a fully running one. So I think, rights, I think the personal rights, in some sense, you can justifiably say they should start in the third trimester.
I hate to do it. We have to do rapid fire where there aren't any responses. So it's just the question. That's it.
Totally fine. I'm going to borrow from Andrew Wilson. I want your yes or no answer, and then I want your qualifier.
Okay.
From your worldview, if Christian nationalists, through persuasion and democracy, did make the requisite changes to make a homosexual action illegal and punishable by death, would that be fascist?
Yes.
Wow.
All right, Jake.
Dr. Carrier, I would say that fascism actually is a political ideology that started in the 20th century in Italy. But would you say that all of the native tribes throughout history, including all of the Aztecs and chieftains, are all fascist? And if so, what would you define the movement spearheaded by Benito Mussolini as?
Yeah, that's a good question. So that gets into the whole, again, we're talking about, I don't know why it matters, the definition of fascism. It's so pointless. But it doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is what it is.
Because you called us all fascist.
So the short answer, like if you wanted a yes or no, right?
No, so like I gave you what I think fascism is, where it comes from.
Yeah.
Are all of these ancient tribes fascist? And if so, what is the movement that was spearheaded by Mussolini called?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. So the word was definitely coined in the early 20th century. I mean, the Italians are the ones who invented it. The concept of what it refers to doesn't necessarily have to originate when the word originated, right? So as regarding other tribes and stuff, we'd have to go case by case as to how they actually conducted their government. I don't know enough about the Aztecs to answer that question. But if you look like at the Bush people in Africa right now, the Bush people in Africa are democratic, and so were the Iroquois.
The Aztecs.
I don't know enough about the Aztecs.
Okay, any Indian tribe that didn't practice democracy, were they fascist?
If they were using force to enforce their will.
So then just the follow-up is, what would you define the movement spearheaded by Benito Mussolini? What is that called?
Well, fascism.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't understand why that's
All
relevant.
right, rapid
Okay.
fire.
Do you think that the millions of Muslims that you advocate come in to help solve our fertility rates share the same values that you do of democracy and individual liberty?
I don't know about millions. What over what period of time are you talking about?
You don't think that you would take millions to help solve our fertility rate?
So would I do that?
You advocated for that.
So assuming we all agree. So remember, we're talking about voting. So we all, as a society, agree that this is a problem to be solved, right? It is not automatically the case that we need to solve the fertility rate problem. We might actually be better off with returning to the population level of World War II. Our society might actually be better off if we did that. Getting there is a problem. But anyway, regarding who we'd bring in, I think we just follow sensible, rational, evidence-based policies as to who we allow to immigrate in. I don't think they're going to be majority Muslim because that's not normally how we're making these calls. Like we've got people coming from Asia, we've got people coming from the Christian countries south of us, and so on. So, and the final result will be by the third generation, they're not going to be the scary Muslims that you're worried about. So,
all right,
Sir Dearborn.
If you can wait just a few more minutes, folks, if you can keep the discussion down, just so people that are sitting around you can hear. Go ahead.
You keep granting yourself like morality, good, evil, justification, but I'm not going to let you run from it, and I need for both of you to basically give the account for the justification for your criteria. Justify your stance. Justify the criteria you're using to justify your stance, please.
So I'm not sure which stance that you're referring to. Given your intro, it sounds like you're asking for how I derive moral values or how I derive prescriptive conclusions. If that's what your question is, then I recommend, again, that article I talked about in Religions, because I literally build it all out there with all the cited sources and all of that. And it is what we've talked about a little bit in our discussion. I talked about it in my opening, which is how we construct ought statements from desires and the way the world works and what achieves those desires.
My question pertains to the source you use with Immanuel Kant. Why would you use Immanuel Kant to try to show that oughts can be derived from an is, even though that Kant himself believed that this only worked in practical rationality and not in moral requirements?
Yeah, that's a good question.
So he specifically says in Critique of Pure Reason on page 556, he says experience teaches what is and what has happened, but not what ought to happen.
Yeah, so that's a good question. The reality is that Kant admitted, so when that came up in the discussion, I needed to establish that there is a way to empirically prove an ought. That was before we get to the question, and I made this distinction a couple times, the distinction between oughts that are true and oughts that are morally true. So getting to the moral ought, you're right. Kant had a different maneuver for the moral ought. I actually proved that his maneuver is a hypothetical imperative. That's actually in some of my published peer-reviewed work. So that actually, in fact, he constructed his entire categorical imperative system on a hypothetical imperative. So Philippa Foot, who also pointed this out, was right, that even Kant's categorical imperative is a hypothetical imperative and is proved, even Kant himself tried to prove it the same way, using what he regarded as a universal desire, that everybody desires to be a man of this nature. And therefore, that is why it would compel them and therefore makes it true that they ought to follow the categorical imperative. So Kant is an example of even Kant, that's what I said, even Kant, who is promoting categorical imperatives, even he agreed that hypothetical imperatives can be proved empirically. So that establishes that. And then we go to the next step, which was that Kant's categorical was a hypothetical.
We have time for just a few more questions.
All right. Dr. Carrier, you stated that you have to look at what Christians have done versus what they say. Should we do the same based upon atheists and what they have done in the past when they have power? USSR, China,
yeah,
etc.
so it's a false comparison because Christianity is to religion what secular humanism is to atheism. So you can have like Islam and Christianity are both religions, but you wouldn't say that whatever's true of Islam is true of Christianity. So the same thing goes with atheism. Atheism includes a lot of different worldviews, some of them quite horrible. So it's not just atheism. That's why I'm saying secular humanism. Secular humanism is a subset of atheism. So the question should be secular humanists. So are there evil atheist ideologies? Absolutely.
Thank you, gentlemen. Dr. Carey, multiple times in this debate, you made a positive reference and sentiment to the government created by the American Revolution, which was, at the most critical definition, nominally Christian. Now, in the middle of the debate, you made negative sentiment in reference to the French Revolution, which was the most secular, which is militantly anti-religious. And historians have causally linked the French Revolution and the other revolts to the widespread breakdown of social cohesion in Europe at large, which then led to the societies that turned totalitarian, like Italy, Germany, and Spain, and Russia, Mao's China, and Pol Pot, Yugoslavia with Tito. So would it not be rational and based on evidence that the massive death tolls by those atheist, militantly anti-religious governments lead you to abandon the secular part of your position and instead embrace Christian humanism, which is way better across all metrics of history?
Well, that's a good question, except the last part is false. So finding an exception to the rule doesn't negate the rule, right? So like statistically, so it's a statistical correlation. The correlation is not a full correlation of 2, it's a correlation that's above 1. So statistical correlation is, statistically, Christian governments usually turn out badly. Atheist governments turn out badly when they're not acting in a democratic fashion. So like the French Revolution was definitely a despotic action. So they the actual purge of it, it's very similar to like Marxist Russia, which is, this is kind of like, this is not a secular humanist society. This is actually a different form of atheism that is actually toxic in all the same ways that Christian nationalism can be.
For Richard, better is what's better for everyone, quote from you. I believe you cited social thriving. Recently, I was reading some anthropology work by Dr. Pierce Raft, and let me tell you about a small island off the coast of Australia named Papua New Guinea. On the island, there are the Sambari people, also known as the Cum Warriors.
Yeah, because everybody was making noise. I couldn't hear
On
you,
the
sorry.
island, so on this island of Papua New Guinea, there's the Sambari people, also known as the Semen Warriors. They have a rite of passage where the elders sodomize the children to bring manhood. From all the studies into them and their tradition, the children love it and say it's positive for their society. Now tell me, is it fascist or bad to force that to stop?
I don't know anything about that, right? So I don't know how much of that is true, and I don't know.
But let's assume it is.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting at. So let's assume that it is true. Yeah, absolutely. Like that's definitely a violation of human rights, and that's a kind of society that I think definitely is bad. Like that's what I'm arguing against. Is that that's the kind of society we should not have, and we should actually have a society that prevents that kind of stuff.
Yeah, they like it.
Yeah, but that's the difference between being irrational, having a false belief, and being rational, having a true belief. That's why my argument, I didn't argue that Christians don't believe what they believe. I argued that what they believe is bad. They might not believe that it's bad, but empirically shows that it's bad, just like that would be empirically bad.
We have. All right, hold on. I got to go to the next question. All right, last question, sir.
All right. I have a question for both of you. I am blind. I've been blind since birth. There's statistically a very low chance that someone like me will be a net benefit to society. So in the world you would like, in the society you'd like, purely based on your worldview, can you tell me what the place for someone like me would be and how you come to that conclusion based on purely your own worldview?
Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. I disagree with the premise that you're not a net benefit to society. Blind people can accomplish a lot. So there isn't really any way you're not producing a net benefit to society. I don't think blindness impairs your ability to do that.
I'll give you a really quick
Yeah.
pithy response.
Statistically, I'm more likely to take more from society than I am to give. It's not that I can't give anything, but net.
That's your metric. Okay.
Yeah, net.
Yeah. You're talking money. Okay. So you contribute, like, as a human being, you contribute a lot to the world that is not financial, right? Like you contribute to the lives of your friends and family. You contribute through work by producing things and so on. So there's a lot of contribution that you're making to society. So I that's why, like, if you just talk about money, that's not relevant. And I think if we look at it in terms of the Rawlsian perspective, which is
general, any type of resource, I'm more likely to need more help than I'm able to provide. I'm more likely to.
That's your net. That's why you said net.
Take any form of resource, energy, community.
I doubt that's as true as you're saying. But even if it's true, let's say it's true, because it's definitely true for some people, for sure. So the whole point of that is, so the Rawlsian perspective is the best society is one that you would arrange, but not knowing who you get to be in that society, right? So you don't know if you're going to be blind. You don't know if you're going to be poor. You don't know if you'll be a woman. You don't know if you'll be black. And would you still want to be in that society knowing that you won't get to pick who you are in that society? You could end up being anybody, and you'd be happy with that society. And so if you reason it out that way, in the Rawlsian way, you would get the answer to your question, is what would be the best society to arrange for someone who happens to be blind, right? So that if I or someone else ends up blind in that society, we would agree, this is the best society for me to be in, given that. And that's why we're looking at human good. That's really the only resource that we're talking about, not like how much money you make or how much electricity you burn or anything like that. The question is, like, you as a human being, right? Like, your life itself, you value your life, right? So you value that. And when you look at it in terms of what it is that you get yourself, would we want to help you continue to do that, right? Like, is in terms of, like, insurance, like, some people's houses burn down, some people's houses don't burn down. But insurance, yeah, a lot of money goes, all of the money that we're paying the insurance company for our premiums goes to pay to build someone a new house. But I never get a new house, right? So it's I get the coverage, right? So if I do get my house burned down, I do get covered. So the society as a system actually helps people. And so I think that's, if you're disabled, it's the same kind of thing. That if you got the bad end of the stick, the society's actually got insurance to cover that, right? Just the same as anybody else. If someone else here like became blind, it would be the same thing. They've got insurance, we've got your back. And that's because you are valuable in and of yourself.
Thank you. We'll go to Andrew. I think he asked for you as well to answer.
Yeah, so obviously Christians believe that human beings are image bearers of God, and they're worthy of dignity, and they're worthy of respect, and that's why their charitable donations towards causes like that are so high. So I think if I had the preference, I would organize society around Christian ethics because we seem to do pretty well with that, as opposed to the secularists. But yeah, that's what I would say.
We have to wrap up, but I do want to say, let's give a huge round of applause to our speakers. It's been a true treat. Thank you, guys. With that, housekeeping, folks, want to let you know is if you did sign up for a signed emblem page as the Super VIP, Ultra VIP, or All Access, be sure you get this before you leave tonight. And thank you so much for coming out to DebateCon 6. It's been a pleasure to have you here. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. It's been a great time. Wait, one last thing. I do want to say, I want to give a huge thank you to Bob, my right-hand man. Bob, can you raise your hand? Thank you very much. Bob really is the one who runs the conference, and my two tech guys, Sean and Jeff. Thank you guys so much. They make it possible. So thank you guys. Thank everybody. I appreciate you guys.